In the White House, President Eisenhower signs the proclamation that makes Alaska's entry into the Union official, nearly 92 years after Lincoln's Secretary of State bought the territory from the Russian Tsar for $7 million.
The Alaska Wild Project podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors.
Barney's Sports Chalet, supplying hunters with the best hand-selected gear since 1963. The exclusive home of frontier gear built for the rugged Alaskan terrain. Your one-stop shop for all your outdoor needs. Visit Barney's today at 906 West Northern Lights.
Big Rays, the Alaskan outfitter, committed to outfitting Alaskans across the state since 1947. Whether you're a recreator, parent, guide, or corporate buyer, Big Rays has the gear you need, tailored for Alaska's harsh conditions. Check out their new exclusive line of Auralic waders. Big Rays for all your outdoor gear and rugged work attire. BigRays.com.
Tailored Restoration 24-hour emergency home services, helping Alaskans restore their dreams since 1972. Services include fire, water, mold, post-emergency cleaning, repair, and remodeling. Give them a call in Anchorage, Eagle River, Matsu, or Fairbanks. Hit them up at tailoredrestorationalaska.com.
Total Truck and Alaska Overlander, Alaska's premier supplier for custom automotive accessories and overlanding products, providing all-inclusive rental vehicles and trailers custom outfitted to explore the Alaskan backcountry with a unique and convenient traveling experience.
TheTreehouseAK.com, located at 341 Boniface Parkway, Alaska's own and grown cannabis and CBD store. Ask the bud tender what the strain of the day is to get your 10% off. The Treehouse, where the culture lives. AKO Farms, located in Sitka, Alaska, built from the ground up with concentrates as their single motivation, with exclusive products such as their sugar wax, full spectrum diamond sauce cards, and more. Ask your local bud tender about AKO. Marijuana has intoxicating effects and may be habit-forming and addictive. Marijuana impairs concentration, coordination, and judgment. Do not operate a vehicle or machinery under the influence. There are health risks associated with consumption of marijuana. For the use of only by adults 21 and older. Keep out of the reach of children, and marijuana should not be used by women who are pregnant or breastfeeding.
The Bait Shack, located on Ship Creek upstream of the bridge. Can't miss the bright red shack. They are the go-to fishing gear rental and guide service on Ship Creek. Tight lines and fish on. Come hook into the action with them. Hit them up at thebaitshackak.com.
Lawn Pro AK, Alaska's year-round professional property maintenance team. Services include weekly lawn care, custom landscaping, fertilizing, weed control, turf repair, and more. Schedule your free estimate at lawnproak.com.
Alaska's OG cider company, Double Shovel, crafting gluten-free colonial-style ciders founded as a healthier, non-inflammatory brew option. Drop by their Pop and Tap room in Anchorage off of 58th and Arctic or visit the second location in Kodiak. Double Shovel, award-winning ciders.
The Alaska chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. BHA is the voice of our Alaskan public lands, waters, and wildlife. Their goal is to uphold our hunting and fishing legacy while keeping our public lands wild. Stand up today and join BHA at backcountryhunters.org.
That was for Brandon.
Perfect. We haven't been hitting it on target.
One for the homies.
We've been missing a lot.
Oh, man.
I started early.
Yeah. Oh, good. Brian, you're gonna have to move that mic close to your mouth there so you can get the full.
There we go.
The full effect. I'd keep that about 2 inches from your face there.
Okay.
And yeah, that thing will stop anywhere you want.
As Jack knows, I tend to shout when I talk. I never yell. I just can talk loud.
People that spend all their time outside talk loud.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Yeah. Lots of wind.
Yeah.
Lots of wind.
Yeah.
All right. How's that sound? Does that sound all right?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Good to go.
Yeah, I was sounding like Batman there last weekend. We were fishing on the lower Kenai for Reds. We had a family reunion in town. Something was going on with my throat, so I was yelling up and downstream, kind of helping everyone, And the water is so high that there wasn't like an easy place to land fish. So it was like I was constantly going up and down to help all the visitors. We had the drift boat down there, but like the next day for the following 3 days, I sounded exactly like Batman, and it was awesome. So like people I had never met before that were here thought that was my voice. It was great.
How was the family? How many people came up?
Man, I didn't count, but it was we had at least 40 visitors. So there's 5 households in Anchorage, and every one of their houses were completely full. There's a rental, and then like everyone's like R-Pod and camper and stuff had guests outside in the driveway. Yeah. So it was packed out for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's a little more than Christmas vacation, Griswold style.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I thought everyone was gonna like travel around and do their own thing, go up to Denali. But no, they like wanted to hang out. So it was like, oh, Jack, where are you doing today? And they're like, oh, I'm supposed to go to work. I'm like, oh, let's go hiking. And you're like, all right, I guess.
Yeah.
Jack, I need you to take everyone fishing again.
Yeah. What are you going to cook us? Nothing. Well, I got to take my meds. So what are you cooking me?
Everyone is super helpful. Like they're down. They're all cool. Like they're louse. They get after it.
They're gamers.
But they
from
just
New York?
didn't
Where did
know.
everyone come from?
Well, the Laos are all from Wyoming originally.
Okay.
So Wyoming, there's a lot in Nevada now, and then Washington, and then there's people are spread around.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of families.
Was there an occasion or just come visit?
We're on a 2-year family reunion schedule after how much fun we had 2 years ago in Olympic
Every
National
2
Park.
years? That's nice.
What I'm hearing.
Wow.
So that's
fun.
So we had the first one in 10 years, 2 years ago. And in Washington Olympic Park, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
So so we're on a 2-year schedule. Hopefully, it's like not in anyone's like hometown next time. It's like somewhere everyone goes, and it's like, all right, we're going for 4 days. Everyone's on the same 4 days. Not like, oh, I'm going a week early. I'm staying a week late.
Yeah. Then you don't have like to do your daily chores.
Oh yeah, it was just it made it for like 2 weeks of family in town. You know.
Yeah, that's
So,
fun.
It was good.
And then the cleanup.
Yeah. and then the cleaner. And then it was like my dad and I were talking, and it was like John Lau's never exhausted. And I was like, dude, I'm so exhausted. And he's like, yeah, I almost didn't make it to this dinner. I wanted to go to sleep. It was like 4:00 in the afternoon. I've never seen him take a nap, you know?
Nothing tires you out like family.
Yeah.
I've been spending a lot of time with family. Went camping a lot with my parents while they're here. They leave in like 2 weeks now to go to Europe and then back to Colombia. Nice. So all the kids were getting out with them. We did the Russian River, floated. Speaking about the floating, so we went and did we did the upper one day, and then we were going to do the middle, and Ski Lac was just hot mess. I mean, there's just people everywhere, a line of like 10 cars to launch.
Yeah.
So I had my parents and obviously my wife and kids, and then my sister flew up and her husband, and they were in Carlos Raft, and we had a great day, beautiful day. Did the whole middle. It was nice. It was nice that we started late because just there's less people. Not so easy. I mean, not as many people. You know what I mean? Because all those guys got to get off at like 6. So we didn't get off the river till like 9, which was nice. So we kind of had it somewhat like to ourselves on the end there. But then we go back. We had a Russian River camp spot with the Handy Bonk guys. With Roger and all those. So it seemed like the whole Russian River campground was ours. Like, so we could just let the dogs go because it's like, don't worry, we know everyone in all the spots.
Yeah.
So we get back, and my brother had got a hole in his raft on the way there because he put the bike on the raft like a dumbass, and then like one of the pedals punctured the thing. But that's an easy fix. But I get back, and we're like eating dinner or whatever, and my brother's like, "Oh, looks like your raft. Something's up with your raft on the left side." So I go, and it's like all deflated. Like one of the quadrants is all deflated. I'm like, "What?" I was like, "What's going on here?" The seam, so it has like on the front has a seam on both sides like this, and then there's a seam in the middle that's under that main thing. The seam had like split, like whatever's covering that thing, and then the seam had just totally like split. It wasn't like a hole. It was
underneath.
Oh man.
Like seam failure.
Seam failed on that, and then I'm like, "What's going on?" So I was like, all right, so I'll try to prepare it or repair it on whatever I like did. I didn't do it. I did kind of a shitty job, just to pump it up. And then I noticed that the seam on the other side is like starting to come off, and then there's a seam that's in the middle that's under under that main flap, I guess, there must be another seam that there's like two seams and then a center seam.
Okay.
And I'm like hearing air. I'm like, where is this coming from? I was like, seems like it's coming from the middle. So I'm like pushing. I'm like, I was like, it is. I was like, I can't even access that. Like, so I don't know how common is that those seams come apart like that?
You know, there's a certain half-life to just about every boat, and then all the different brands, just like cars, are going to have certain symptoms over time, and sometimes it's not you. You know, it's not you that physically or mechanically did damage, you know, or trailer rash or, you know, whatever on the river, or putting the bicycle or something sharp in, you know, hooks and whatnot. But you know, there is a half-life to just about everything. And you probably on that boat have a glued seam. And what happens is there's some outgassing over time. So that plastomer group is changing. And that outgassing is you're losing that seam integrity. And most seams, even if they're constructed properly and glued properly, you'll have a seam tape on the inside, which is not very accessible. And then you'll have the actual overlap of the seam. And that'll have a certain, you know, number of inches of overlap. And then you'll finally have a seam tape on the outside. And so those seam tapes are overlapping that main seam.
Gotcha.
And the seam tapes usually don't have a lot of apron. They're not real wide.
No, it's like,
you know, it's about an inch, you know, maybe an inch and a half. Very few are 2 inches of apron, but some are. And those are all glued too. So what happens though is if you get that main seam going, then the seam tapes don't have the integrity to really hold it back. They protect it. They protect it from UV or something wiping against the seam and things like that. But over time, and a lot of times too, if you leave your boat out, and so it's in the sun, for example, then it's cold, then it's sun, then it's cold. So you get this expansion, contraction, contraction. And there's a microenvironment inside the boat that's happening too. Similar, if you popped a balloon, you've created that instant microclimate where it's slimy inside, but you swear it didn't start slimy inside. So those pressure changes create that microclimate, and that stretching and contracting and stretching, and that microclimate's what ends up usually taking seams out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And on your boat, likely that glued seam is the weakest point on your boat. Where if you had a welded seam and it was welded correctly, it'd be actually the strongest point on the boat.
Gotcha.
Not that either holds air any better than the other, but as far as that half-lifing in time and that outgassing and all those other factors, the welded seam usually will hold its integrity longer. But you might have issues with both. It's hard to say.
So a welded seam is like you actually press it like together with some heat and some chemicals
usually it's a heat or radio frequency that does that. And so there's different welders that are out there, whether it's literally almost like a hand iron. That's how pack rafts, a lot of pack rafts are made, because you got to be kind of sensitive and touchy-feely with a pack raft. It's light-duty materials. But on big rafts, you have like even wedge welders that grab on both sides and heat it up. And then there's air welders too. And you can create really rugged seams all the different ways.
I was thinking like carpet seam, you know, you hold on both sides.
So are you sure yours is glued?
It doesn't seem like it was glued. I think it was welded.
Okay.
Because you can actually, I don't see any like residue or any kind of like, I ended up trying to glue it, but I did a really shitty job because I was just like, oh, let me just see if I can fix this real quick. Because I was going to go again the next day. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to hold. But I'm like, God, good thing I wasn't on the middle of the river. And the whole thing, the seam just comes apart with my entire family and my parents. You know, on the raft, dude.
Pump.
So now I'm like, you know, I got to get that. I don't even know where to take that.
And so that's a Gary King boat, Alaska.
Alaska Outfitters.
So that is a glued boat.
Okay.
Those they started making those in a company in South Korea originally. And they of course copied a lot of boats there. And you know, the South Koreans are really good at copying things pattern by pattern. And you know, you got a lot of textile industries in the Asian countries that are really with it. They know how to measure stuff. They know how to you know, get things right in that regard. But you got a couple things going on in those countries. You got massive swings in humidity. So if your boat was made during the monsoon season, it's probably going to live about half as long as something made in the dry season because it's glued. You got that high humidity. And then it also depends on who's heavy enough to be rolling those seams. If you've got, a very light person that doesn't really push very hard, you're not going to get quite the seam integrity either. So there's a lot of factors in that. But there were many companies that used that factory. And the boats that say Gary King on the side, if you know anything about the history of Gary King, that was one of the premier sports stores in Alaska that people from all around the world knew. It was kind of a mini Cabela's before Cabela's had stores all over the country, kind of a thing. It was its own little. And Gary King was very with it and knew what was going on. And but after that store failed, with the box stores and everything, it just syndicated buying wasn't working out. And when that store finally failed, there was a translator involved that was making these deals with these factories in South Korea. Well, the manager that was in the boat department didn't see eye to eye with Gary King, and that's how you ended up with the 6th Avenue Outfitter boat, and eventually that became the Alaskan Outfitter Company. And so, of course, they sparred back and forth who was the better raft and on and on and on, but they were actually the same specs, the same boats, same dimensions, same translator. And but that's a glued boat, and if it was sold correctly, it was viewed as a high value to cost boat. That could go mild to wild for the most part, and if you're willing to live with a little bulkiness and not quite the handling, and there's a few things lost in the translation of the build, all those things considered, but yeah, there's a lot of those boats that are still on water. So
I feel like I've got my money out of the boat. I've definitely used the boat a lot.
A
lot. It's been on many trips all over the state.
Oh, yeah, dude.
So now I'm like, well, do I repair it and try to keep it going, or do I just get something else? I don't know who does those kind of repairs.
So I have a whole repair station, and we're probably one of the busiest in the state. So when I say we're after the pandemic, it's party of one, army of one, kind of a thing. But
so on that, I just wanted to add on that. So when you repair it, also, do you replace the entire panel itself, or do you just do the same?
Well, in this case, what we're going to look at first, because, I'm not a kind of a guy, as Jack knows, I'm not a guy that holds up a cash register. I'm an on-water guy and look at it from what would I want on my back out in the middle of nowhere. And so, what I'm going to look at first is I'm going to look at what's called your HIN number. It's the same as a VIN number on a vehicle. And those this is good for, your audience too. Those last 2 digits are the year it was made. Unlike a VIN number on a car, you'd have to figure out that code for keys and on and on and on.
Carry the 2.
But but those last 2 digits are going to tell you what the date is on that boat.
Okay.
And that boat has a really good practical lifespan of about 5 to 15 years. And once you're into that 15-year mark, you're going to start, keeping it real clean and keeping an eye on it. And some people can get 20 years out of it, depending on use and depending on how clean it was when they put it away. And so it's possible to get that. But once seams start to go and you're having multiple seams starting to go, the rest of the boat's going to go that way too. So even if I do a seam repair, as invasive as that is to go do that, and spendy as it is to go do that, those heroics probably aren't worth it, because as soon as you do that, it's going to fish mouth right where I didn't do the repair. It's going to start to come open.
Gotcha.
And so, it should be inspected. And you should have sort of a baseline of, where you're going to go with it. And it's sort of a hierarchy of, what you need repaired and what you're willing to sort of live with, depending on your use. But I would say if multiple seams are going in the same area, there's complexities in that repair alone, and it gets spendy.
Gotcha.
And it's probably going to happen throughout the rest of the boat. And a lot of it's happening on the inside of the boat where you don't see it happening.
Yeah, like I said, and I was like putting my finger, I was like, this is on the middle. I was like, there's no way I can even access this. Because it just seemed beyond my capabilities. But I'd love to take it down and just have you take a look at it. But it got me thinking and talking to my brother, is like, you know, I was like, man, there's a lot of seams here. If this continues to happen, it's gonna be like. So is there a raft that is of higher quality that maybe has less seams or has a longer life to it?
Or the welded.
Most definitely there are.
Okay.
In some cases, you know, you'll say, oh, well, then I'm going to have to pay an exorbitant fee for that. And there are those options out there. There's going to be, you know, mil spec and commercial grade, you know, versions of these things. And that's what your boat has some basis for in its design. But that said, you don't need to go, you know, all out and have 6 to 8 to 10 grand in just the boat before you ever put a frame and oars and straps and all the things that make a comprehensive package.
Yeah.
So there are some players in the game that have very good control of their fabrication, that it's close to on site, so they're controlling that aspect of it. But also in the build, it's not very far from where the fabrics are, so it's you know, the quality control remains very consistent throughout.
Gotcha.
And what happens there is then you can get those price points that have very high value to quality ratios without getting into the 6 to 8 to 10 grand rafts, and they will go mild to wild, and they will have welded seams.
Yeah.
And some of those boats might not be the fastest to the fishing holes or fastest into camp, but they will get you there reliable every time.
Yeah.
And so who's really in a race? The only people that really should be in a race on a river are probably outfitters and guides.
Yeah.
You know, that those commercial operators say, hey, I need to get to this campsite because I have this size of group and this is what they're here to do.
Yeah.
You know, wildlife or fishing or, you know, whatever they came to do. So a guide might see another outfitter in front of him and say, we're going to pass that guy like he's standing still. And it's that, then those expensive geometries and those things like that start to pay off.
Gotcha.
But for the most part, you don't need that. What you need is a really reliable boat that's forgivingly stable, that you're just, every day you go out, you're not going to be thinking about what's next, what's going to happen to this boat. And
Yeah.
so there are those brands that exist.
Okay. Yeah, and then I started like looking at other brands, and you're right. I mean, it gets up to like $9,000 for a raft, and I'm like, what is causing this to be so expensive? So you would say that the raft that I have, and my brother has, and several people have, is in like a scale of 1 to 10, kind of in the middle.
No, it's probably in the 3.
In the 3, okay.
The 3 out of 10, and that doesn't mean that 3 is bad. You should probably be having, you know, 2 and 3 starting is pretty doggone good. 1 and below is a pool toy.
Gotcha.
And people do make their way down rivers with pool toys and inner tubes every day, but that's, you know, you don't want to invest your family and your time and your gear and, you know, everything else in that scenario. So
Skyhawk.
Yeah.
Get some Walmart Skyhawks.
Yeah. We
went down the Yakima on that, actually. It was hilarious. bought an extra one for the cooler in case we had to dump the cooler and save ourselves. Yeah.
And your only investment loss could be the beer you were hauling
Pretty
in
much,
the boat.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
The flamingo.
Yeah, that's why we have the plastic caps now. You just carry it to your Mustang.
The koozies.
Yeah, your Mustang. Just hook it on
The
there.
6-pack
Float down.
koozie holder.
Well, I mean, I envision myself rafting the rest of my life. My family loves it. My wife loves it. I mean, we love fishing on it, hunting on it, and doing all that stuff. So now that I know that where I am with this raft, I'm like, well, maybe I should invest in something that's going to be of higher quality. So if you're willing to say, what are some of those brands that are like, okay, these ones are kind of middle of the road, but you know what I'm saying, you're not going to worry about being stranded, you know, on some river.
And can you keep your frame as well?
That was the next question.
Well, let me back you up a little bit here. So, you know, you hit the nail on the head, is that this is something that, you know, you can do for a lifetime. Once you develop, you know, you've got to learn something, obviously, and you got to have some skill sets and some comfort zones, and then have some realistic. You know, we're not all young anymore, right? So you start out with very high comfort zones and sometimes low skill sets, and it gets you through. Whereas, you know, the older you get, you hope to work smarter on the river. And so, but the other thing you said is that, you know, you can do this for a lifetime and a family, and there's versatility there. So if you're out fishing, if you're out camping, if you're out hunting, if you don't feel like backpacking it all in on your back, and compared to the lodge experience too, a lot of people, in Alaska, their dream is to go to a big fishing lodge. And, and I suppose for somebody that says, well, I'm not really up to rafting, I don't have the skill set, I don't have the comfort zone, I don't have the gear, I don't know what I'm doing, so maybe I shouldn't start on my own and have a do-it-yourselfer out there. But those fishing lodges are $10,000 to $20,000 a week.
Yeah.
They're expensive. What the experience, though, that you're getting, even though that you are flying to all these little outpost camps and all these little destinations here and there, and those are pretty epic places to go. Is it worth 10 or 20 grand? Absolutely not. It's people processing at its finest. Mm-hmm. And that's not a dig to any given one lodge out there, but I'm saying, you could go out in the middle of nowhere spending that 10 or 20 grand, go to a bleached out, moldy weatherport camp that looks like it barely survived the winter, and you step off the airplane and you better hope the fishing's good in the river, because the rest of it is very, very basic. Yeah. And you could be doing all of that to a much higher degree and much more fun and much better fishing and a daily scenery change as you go rafting.
Yeah.
So it's totally the way to do things up here. Those are our highways of opportunity that so few get the opportunity to experience.
Yeah. I agree 100%. I mean, it's one of our favorite things to do is to go rafting. And I started off, as most people might have, I don't know when I started, 15 years ago, with a little one-man raft before I was married, and hitting the Kenai and all these different places with a little one-man raft, and I had a little fish cat, and that thing's been holding steady. Actually, that thing blew a seam. The same this past weekend. I was like, well, we can't take the big raft. I was like, well, I'll take the little guy out. I haven't took her out. And I go in the backyard, and my son's like, it looks like she's having a baby. And I'm like, what? So I go back there, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And like the seam on the side came off, and it's just like bulging out. I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? I was like, no.
Better to happen in the yard, though.
That's right. That's what I thought. That's what I told them too. I said, at least it happened here.
Why is my tail waving?
It's like going
I think if you were to go out, and I've seen, of course, pictures sometimes that Jack will share on the internet or whatever. We've been friends on Facebook for 10 years.
Yeah, at least
something like that. And so I tend to see some of the boats that go out, and I think some of those are what that I've seen are called bug boats, and they were put out by that Woosong. Basically, translate that as inflatable fun company of Korea, and so they came out with a company by the name of Star. Came out, and Star was made in the same factory. And so they produced these bug boats, which are supposed to be sort of half cataract, half raft. So the floors are raised up off the bottom. They don't have an inflatable floor. They have actually just a conventional floor, but raised off the bottom. They have fairly fat tubes in the midline, and then they diminish as they go up. So the boat kind of is U-shaped. If you looked at it straight on the water, it looks kind of U-shaped because the floor never is on the water.
Okay.
And they're big tubed in the middle, so they're kind of skinny. They don't have quite the capacity as a self-bailer would. They don't have quite the stability. But what they are is they're kind of unique for day fishing or quick jaunts with no loads. They do really well in that environment because you don't have that weight of an inflatable floor. You don't have some of those things going. And you do get a little bit of the attributes of the cat and the raft. For handling, you could put a little motor back there, a little less surface tension on the water. So there's a time and a place for them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a conventional raft, self-bailing raft, and a cataract, in their own right, outperform the bug style, hands down.
Yeah.
And so normally I would say make a selection versus a hybrid of the two.
Gotcha.
Is that the blue one you had on your Facebook or on your website? The one that had the two tubes and then kind of raised floor at one point?
So, yeah, that was probably a repair that we were doing. And I was explaining sort of the Achilles heels of the bug boats.
Gotcha.
And, a cataract, if you get big enough diameter and the tubes are basically parallel on there. Yeah. You can straddle over a lot of things, like instead of just going around every single rock in the river. If it's something sort of mogul sized and straddleable, you don't have to go around it on a cataract. Yeah. Well, it invites you in a big boat, in a bug boat, to do that. And of course, the bigger diameter in the bug boat, you're going to haul a little more weight in it, and it's going to lull you into thinking you can still do that. And what happens is it gets rock rash right down the center, just as if you ran over a rock and hit your differential in your vehicle. It's that scenario, and so they tend to rip out there a lot. And
I can see that.
So I probably put that on the website as, here's another one. And then a lot of those boats, what they did, and I don't know why Jim King, that was Gary King's son, decided that this was what they were going to do. It probably predates his involvement in any of the copies and designs. But they put this track stuff on it. And Star did the same thing. A lot of these, because they were all just kind of working from the same factory, same components, same designs, and just calling it something different. So I've seen, like, some of you guys are running what would be called the Keen Eye Drifter.
Yeah, that's CJ and Kyle's boat.
Yep. And so that from the Star's perspective was called the Bug series. And so everybody had these different names for the exact same thing. But what they did was they put basically a dock rash like strake material on the bottom. And it's an unsupported material, but it's mainly for hitting a dock with possible staples and scrapes and things like that.
It's kind of ribbed, right?
Yes, it's ribbed.
Okay.
And it's a horrible scenario for a river raft, because it robs you of handling. Might help you a little bit with straight tracking, but who's really straight tracking much on a river? You're always kind of working with the river and the ferry angles and whatnot. But the problem is you always get injuries right along all of that straking material, that rub straking stuff, and it's impossible to repair that very well in the field.
Yeah.
And if you punch a hole completely through those ribs, how are you going to put a patch on it? Yeah. The only way is to actually grind all those ribs completely flat, and who has a belt sander out there? So I guess if you were just always trailering your boat, and it was always relatively easy rivers and deep rivers, then I could see it making sense. But from an Alaska perspective, it's just horrible, because it makes it harder to pack, harder to repair. I mean,
probably heavier too. Huh?
Oh, much heavier, and so you tend to see you tend to see a lot of that in the Alaskan Adventure, the Gary King boats, the older Star boats. Now you guys just did a recent float trip with me as well.
I just saw CJ, and he was like, we figured out that we drag a lot, and then on top of that, like,
the boat's the slowest.
He's like, we're the slowest by far. Everything.
But one of the boats that came on the trip was this new Star that Brian has.
So Star,
the green one?
Yeah, the green one.
That's the one we rented, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's interesting is that the rep from Star that's in the U.S., and they were mostly an East Coast operation, but had a long time in the business. The people know what they were doing. It's just who was going to make their boat for them is what it comes down to. And if all the major U.S. brands say, no, we'll go get it somewhere else, what are you going to? You're going to finally go, no, but I need a boat. I need a boat to sell. So
got to find that translator,
right? Exactly. Absolutely.
Pull them out of retirement.
And so, but NRS, Northwest River Supply, decided to buy 50% of Star, and they moved a factory to Vietnam. And this was about the time that all the tariffs were starting during the Trump administration. So there was a lot of tariff dodgers, and what was happening there, the tariff dodgers were doing it for a reason. They wanted to keep a price point. They wanted to keep something consistent. But all of a sudden, once the tariffs started, they started outsourcing everywhere. So the floor was coming from someplace, the raft was coming from someplace, the valves were coming, and sometimes it was a mystery in every single box.
Oh, wow.
And I experienced that with a company that I was working with, that I was designing some of their boats and having some good success with. And I mean, not 100% of my designs were coming out perfectly the way I wanted it, but close, and they were willing to work with me. And it really put that company's boats on the West Coast and in Alaska, because they wouldn't have sold at all otherwise. But what we did was we took kind of a recreational grade boat, put commercial grade features on it, put commercial grade valves on it, and all of a sudden you had something that recreationally now could go wild to wild and be pressed into commercial use. And some of those, are going strong still.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were glued boats. So we all of a sudden we were now competing with all the Gary King and this Old Star and all this stuff, but we were selling them for what they should be.
Yeah.
And telling people what they were, not saying go down 6 Mile every night with your commercial, six tops, but anyway, these were great moose hunting boats, great fishing boats, great to do, up to class 4. And you just don't want big waterfalls and rock wall hits in class 5 with these. It's not that it couldn't do it. It's just you wouldn't do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that brand went by the wayside because during all the tariff dodging, then came the pandemic. So now mystery in every box came. What's the mystery and what's missing in every box?
Mystery.
and they're still getting shipped to Alaska, so the box is the same size, but you can't do anything with it. So I was starting to stockpile box after box after box, and I told the company, your issues won't get out because they're not good for you guys and they're not good for me, and I'm never going to put these on an Alaska river, and never going to demo them, never going to rent them, never going to sell them. But you got to figure out what to do with them because they're piling up.
Yeah.
And it was to the point where self-bailing floors that were put in the boats were gasketing off all the holes. And so that you'd inflate the floor and it would just completely close off the whole boat.
Man.
So it looked like a boat, but to the person that would possibly buy that unknowingly,
Yeah.
they'd go and hit some big waves and think everything was great and their boat would be full and they'd be like, why is this not self-bailing?
Yeah.
Get the bucket, guys.
Yeah. Oh, no.
And sadly, what happened to probably the majority of those boats is they were sold on Amazon and eBay to unbeknowing customers after they left my hands. That it was just like, no, we're done. We're done. Right. But there were other players that didn't have to go do that because again their materials and their boat manufacturer were literally on the same block. If you took a football field, the other side was the manufacturing.
Right.
So they never suffered at all through that. And during that time, Star and NRS put a factory in Vietnam, and Vietnam is very high on textiles and cutting. And it's traditionally, you buy a nice suit, it could be from Hong Kong or Vietnam or whatever. So they know what they're doing.
Right.
And they know how to measure and they know how to get it right. And with NRS's design and Star's, ability to put out a second product for NRS, it benefited both companies. So you had good geometry, good materials, and it put Star back on the map as, hey, you are a player again. And they still carry some that just has the Star brand, but the ones you guys used was an NRS Star.
Right.
And that boat, boy, you're not undergunned. If somebody shows up in the most expensive raft they could ever buy, and you show up in that Star and you run the exact same waters, you're not going to be undergunned. You're not going to be underpaced. It's pretty surprising value to cost ratios, and that boat's rugged.
Yeah.
Very, very rugged.
And it's a 15-footer, so it's amazing how much. It's beefier too. How much more space and storage you can, it can haul a load.
Yeah. I was piloting that one and it moved great down the river. It was impressive. You don't know what you're missing until you get a new one. And you're like,
it's really, you got to get the geometry right.
Yeah.
And interestingly, Northwest River Supplies has a lot of companies' geometries because as all these different generations of rafts and all the guys that really designed these rafts, let's say it started with surplus boats cut in half and made into double enders all the way up to what we have now. All these outfitters, these guides, these design guys, the ones that stuck around, NRS bought the majority of those patterns. And so when you combine that kind of tradition and that geometry with the newest materials and all the good valves and on and on and on, and what the 15 does for Alaska, that because let's say if you were in Colorado and you needed a big boat, you'd probably get a 16 or an 18, but you're probably hauling in a truck or a trailer everywhere you go, never putting it in an airplane. But a 15 will haul way more than a 14, close enough to the same loadout on frame and oars and all that stuff, And but now you're drafting much more shallow water with that heavier load, and it will swallow what a 14-foot boat takes. And you haven't spent really any more. So it's just that real sweet spot.
Yeah.
And it happens with Zodiac type boats, sport boats too. You'll find that if you get an Achilles 156, a 15.5, it'll do almost every single thing any dive rescue commercial boat will do, and yet a guy can still pick it up, put it in his own vehicle, get it around, and so there's a sweet spot for 15-foot boats in the inflatable industry.
Yeah, I felt like that thing was pretty maneuverable. It went right over a lot of things, like, normally you're yelling rock, like, okay, we're going to skid, don't fall out of the raft, and it just went right over it. Barely just took it with a load too. We had a pretty heavy load, and I feel like I could have gone down Lake Creek in that thing and just missed all the trees and done the thing. Yeah, Campbell Creek not so much.
well, you told me you'd be hauling a load, and that's why we settled on the 15.
Yeah, right.
We didn't know, I think at the time, who would be rowing, the boat, but we knew it'd be heavy, and that river that you were on, could give you a lot of looks on volume. So it can start out in a shallow creek, and you could end up, with all those boulders in the rapid covered, and so super versatile. It'll get through the shallows, but when you need that stability for the big stuff, it really does well.
Yeah. How's the price point on that?
So that's this kind of goes back into your question of what should you get next, and that's a very likely candidate. Not that you might need a 15-footer, but as far as the do-all with good fabrication, good valves, meaningful warranty, good company that's going to stand behind it. And NRS is no longer owned by Bill Parks. He passed away, actually, I'm going to say 2 months ago, but he had given the whole company over to all its workers.
Awesome. Cool.
And I really noticed on the phone in the last, let's say 5-6 years, maybe more than that, but that everybody is actually now a boater. Everybody takes their time off and grabs a demo or rental. And, everybody knows, hey, I've been in this dry suit, or I like that life jacket. And it doesn't matter if it's male or female. They're all like into it. And that didn't happen 10, 15 years ago. It was just like, what do you want? What do you want? Yeah. Cha-ching. And now, if you really had questions, like let's say a woman's dry suit. Well, I don't wear women's dry suits. What do I know about the fashion and the fit and all that? But, hey, woman rep comes on and says, well, I really like this because of this, that, and the other. And I'm like, great. What size?
Yeah.
And so, and as you guys know, when you've been to my shop, it's pretty much, I go into mostly the hard goods. So when you go to my shop, it's not some colorful bungee cord or the next fancy glove or, what kind of hat you might want to wear on the river. It's always going to be the frames, the boats, the oar locks, the oars, those things that make the trip happen.
Yeah.
Because my business centers around, that stuff, needing to go mild to wild. And when you buy it from me, you don't have to come back. Somebody has to pretty much steal it, lose it, or you really have to drive it hard, or something.
Yeah.
So
and for people listening, it's Alaska Raft Connection.
Yes.
Right. And where's the store located?
So we're out on Lake Hood.
Okay.
So we're at 4235 Aircraft Drive. We're right next to Katmai Air.
Okay.
And on the water behind White Wings, and if you're kind of familiar with Lake Hood, there's the one that has the most planes on the lake rusts.
Yep.
And then there's the museum right there. We're just hooking around the other end of the lake a little bit. But it's great to be there because we have so many trips that fly out, whether they're guided, whether they're do-it-yourself unguided. So many trips fly out, or so many people picking up their people at the airport and say, "We're going to the Gulcana," or whatever. So that it's really handy, and then I can get everything to air cargo. We also do aircraft recoveries. Just got back from a gnarly one, actually, and nobody passed away on this one, but I would say they were pretty lucky to live. And a real mess down there. But doing the aircraft recoveries also helps me stay on aircraft property, because you need all the inflatables. You need the Johnny on the spot, let's go, get it done, and you need the access craft to pull this off. So whether it happens right in Lake Hood, I'm the first guy there.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty nice to be able to do that. And then I do some basic stuff on aircrafts every once in a while. So if somebody says they want a seat in the back of a beaver for the dirtiest fishermen, then they can just get out in the lake and scrub it off. I'll put a raft skin that's meets all the flame things and certifications and California codes and on and on and on. And I've put different coatings on tires and things like that, because again, you're working with plastics and rubbers and the chemistry's there. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it works out.
I always wondered why Lake couldn't that. So
yeah,
that's perfect. I live right there too, so you'll be seeing me this week.
No, it's the dream location. It really is.
Oh, it's beautiful there too.
Yeah. It works.
We're gonna take a quick break, and I want to come back and get into the frames and stuff like that, because I've been geeking out on all this stuff. Barney's Sports Chalet, supplying hunters and outdoor enthusiasts with the highest quality gear and equipment since they opened their doors in 1963. Barney's carries exclusive brands such as Alpaca Rafts, Sitka Sims, Exo Mountain Gear, Hilleberg, and much more. Barney's prides themselves with keeping a huge stock on hand of various top-of-the-line tents, footwear, sleeping bags, optics, cross-country skis, just to name a few. Barney's is also the exclusive retailer of Montana knives, Seek Outside, Kafaru, Stone Glacier, and their in-house brand, Frontier Gear of Alaska. Barney's has a superior selection of top-rated boots, sleeping bags, dry bags, mountaineering gear, electronics, and accessories. Need freeze-dried food or mountain snacks? They got that too. Barney's now has an amazing new paperback catalog available for in-store pickup or online order. Visit them today at barneysports.com, or even better, stop by the store in Anchorage at 906 West Northern Lights. If you want the best, there's only one name in the game: Barney's Sports Chalet.
The Alaska chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. BHA is the voice of our Alaska public lands, waters, and wildlife. From national level policy work to engagement with boots on the ground projects from Kotzebue to Ketchikan, BHA performs public land cleanups, hunting and fishing clinics, and community education to help take your game to the next level. BHA's community-minded goal is to uphold our hunting and fishing legacy while keeping wildlands wild and fostering the next generation of sportsmen and women for years to come. Make sure to follow BHA Alaska for upcoming events, local brewery pint nights, and more. Stand up for Alaska public lands and waters by supporting the Alaska chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Join us today at backcountryhunters.org.
The Treehouse AK, your one-stop dispensary located at 341 Boniface Parkway. When you pull up to the Treehouse, you'll notice the beautifully hand-drawn art by Alaska's own Ted Kim. Once you get inside, you're going to see many of the same people that have been there since they opened. The bud tenders know you and what you like and what new product you should be checking out. The store is super clean and the music's always on point. The Treehouse and local owner Josh Boots is a staple in the cannabis culture through his music, community givebacks, and a lifetime desire to bring the people of Alaska the best products available. The Treehouse always has at least 25 strains available, and they're all shown prominently deli style in clear, openable jars so you can see and smell your options. Other products include edibles, concentrates, vape carts, pre-rolls, flour, dab rigs, and anything else you need, they got it. They also have some pretty sick merchandise for sale. Check out thetreehouseak.com, or better yet, stop by the Treehouse today and get started on their loyalty program. Remember, you must be 21 years of age to enter their store. The Treehouse, where the culture lives. All right, we're back. And I didn't introduce the show, so welcome to Alaska Wild Project, episode 129. Today we have Brian Richardson from Alaska Raft Connection. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Alaska Raft Connection. Yeah. So I wanted to get into the frame stuff because when I bought that raft, it comes with that frame that to me in the beginning I thought it was a little bit chintzy. It's cool that you can adjust it and you can add things to it simply, and it has little clicks and tabs, but it didn't seem as thick or durable or strong as some of the other brands as far as the frames go. Now it was nice because it was light and I could take it apart and it could come apart easy and you could add stuff to it, but I was always concerned about the quality of that frame versus some of the frames that I'd seen like on your raft.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are good concerns, and there's really not a good way to sugarcoat it. Those are copies of commercial grade type frames, or high-end recreational frames, in the sense that it's copied almost right down to the components, the pipes, all that, but none of them spec or are held to a spec. And so there are plenty of fittings out there, for example, that are used for other things that would need a specification. Let's say they're used for shelving or scaffolding or whatever. They have to meet some sort of a threshold of, different characteristics that make them what they are and functional. And then there are some that are more architectural type patents, but just really, really decent designs that have stuck around for a long time and do that go mile to mile, day in and day out, and can be warranted for life. And then the pipe, just for practical purposes, I'll just call it pipe. But, there's different pipes that you can get, but the sort of the industry standards that you're going to see in speed rails for commercial use in buildings are usually going to be what's called 6061 T6 aluminum. So it's a tempering of T6, a heat treatment of the aluminum. And so 6061 is very, it's incredibly strong in the Schedule 40s that are usually used for frames. So typical standard for, let's say, and it's become the standards for Alaska too, but the standards that you'll see for, Idaho and Montana and, those areas, those are usually 1.25" speed rail, which is a Schedule 40 T6 6061. And so the fittings that would work with that pipe would have to go either on the inner diameter or the outer diameter of that particular pipe. And then there's a Colorado standard, and this has obviously come from Grand Canyon kind of trips with 18-foot boats, and you have to haul the bathroom with you and the fire pit and the, don't step on that beach, step on this carpet kind of they got to haul a lot of stuff. And these are also 30-day trips, so lots of food and beverages and, camping gear and people and their baggage and whatnot. So, that's usually going to be 1.5". So it's, the actual wall thickness is not that much difference, but the actual diameter of the pipe is quite a bit bigger. And most of that will be an outer diameter fitting. And so it's got to fit that 1.5". And so those straight pieces that you normally going to see, whether it's the side rails or the straight crossbars, those are usually going to be 6061. And the longer they are, the more you want that 6061 and that T6.
Gotcha.
Because what happened if you had a T1 or a T3, it would look very similar. It might be a little different shade. It might, but if I showed you one piece and another piece, you say, oh yeah, that's the same thing, but not quite. Sort of the difference between a good knife that stays sharp and a knife that bends or snaps or breaks or doesn't hold an edge. It's that distinctly different. And the other pipe that you will see is 6063 aluminum in that T6. And 6063 has properties where it bends a little easier, and so it doesn't deform or frost or crack when it bends. So the leading pipe that you're going to find in Anchorage, because not a huge population of rafters here, you're going to see 6063 T6 because they want to make a neat railing to go wherever it goes. Yeah. And when somebody's hand is on it, you don't want to feel that funny frosting or kinking or anything like that. But both of those pipes, for the most boats that are probably sold in Alaska, work perfectly well. All their strength thresholds are awesome. What the frame that came on that boat as a package is they're trying to copy every detail. The problem is, and this is not sugarcoating it, so sorry about this, but it's recycled beer cans. It's what it is. And what is a recycled beer can? What's in it? What impurities are in there? What thresholds does it have to meet? So the pipe has its issues, but it might be in a certain given size good enough and look good enough and function well enough for the vast majority of people. Yeah. But if you took that into 6 Mile routinely, it wouldn't make it. and the same with the fittings. So the fittings are outer diameter fittings.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with outer diameter fittings, but again, if that metallurgy, that the ingredients in that, you don't know what they are. That's a mystery alloy. And we're not talking like good tent poles from a North Face tent, because guess what? That's 6061 or 7000 series or it's known what those properties are. But those fittings on your boat look the same, but of unknown properties. And so then you go to your oarlocks, and your oarlock is going to look like some bronze oarlock. However, it's probably missing a lot of manganese and some of the other ingredients in a good oarlock. So if you flipped your boat over and it hit a rock, your oarlock would shear right off like a brick breaking by comparison to another one that might bend, but still kind of get you through.
Yeah.
And same with the oar stands. The oar stands, as you know, are basically derivatives of those pipe fittings, and then a pipe sticking up. So you put that whole thing together, again, you're probably going to be okay, but when you really push it into a certain environment, or have a tip or a flip or with a full load, you're going to wipe the frame right off that boat.
Yeah. I would say that going into it, when I first bought it, thinking this is an intro boat, you know what I mean? And it's been great for that. It's been great for what we've done. But as you go and you go on these trips, you eye other boats and you're like, oh, that looks like it's a little better than mine. That looks like this is different. This is different. So I didn't go into purchasing that raft thinking, oh, this is the best thing you can get out there. But for as far as like the price and what I got out of it
as a package deal, you did great.
You
did great.
And even if I have to like trash that whole thing and go to something else, I feel as if I got my money's worth out of it, because I use that thing a lot,
And in this case, the
10
frame
years.
has outlasted your boat.
Yes.
And what more could you ask for, really?
Yeah.
I mean, flipping it over and rubbing it on rocks is pretty much the only thing he hasn't done in that boat. So far.
Pretty much.
That's right.
But it's pretty wild how all that stuff works, and you can see plastics too, like good oars, the blades.
Oh yeah.
I encourage people in doubt, put your blade in a freezer. And then pull the cheap blade out and the expensive blade out and hammer them on the workbench as hard as you can. Gavel down. One will shatter, and the other you're the one going the other direction. It's pretty amazing how some of these plastomers are better, just like the metallurgy. But no, I think if the frame is still running well and the boat that you have is the seams are going and you decide to walk away from the boat, you might consider a boat of similar size and trying to take that investment from the frame and carrying it further. Based on what you do, you haven't had a problem yet. It's not to say you won't, but chances are you've field tested it enough that what's going to happen is going to happen. Unless you really start going into different environments and these kinds of things.
Unless you went to like a 15-footer, then you'd probably have to upgrade the.
That's right.
You're gonna do a second deck if you have a 15-footer.
Oh yeah.
Maybe just do the table and then the second deck.
Second on
like,
top.
Like theater seating on the back. He's just got like 3 rows, so that there's just
fisherman chair at the top. The spotter.
Or the spotter.
Put the rack on the front, just double, just looking at each other.
That's
I mean, I think as far as like someone that's trying to get into it, like I wanted to upgrade. Basically my story is I went from the one man to I went to a cataract, which was great. But then I had a kid, and I was like, well, I can't have the kid. I need a floor there so the kid can be safe. And so I went and got that raft, which I got a hell of a deal on it. What I'm saying? Obviously, it was a great deal. And I feel like as far as an intro boat and someone that's trying to get into it and you're not sure if this is going to be your thing, it's not a bad purchase. But then as you go and do more extreme trips and you're doing moose things and you're hauling moose meat and you're doing all this heavy duty stuff, then you're like, okay, well, you don't want to risk your life and your family or whoever your hunt parties are with some subpar, materials when you could get something better.
Yeah, because in the grand scheme of things, when you look at, let's say you do a fly out moose hunt, and let's say you are going 2-hour flight out, so that means they're 2 hours out and 2 hours back, and then they come get you. Maybe the river's vectoring even away from that 2 hours, so now it's even more. I mean, that becomes the price of your boat. Not necessarily framing the oars and everything else, but that becomes the price of your boat pretty fast on on one outing.
Hauling a moose down the Yukon and braided and crazy, and the river goes up.
Well, and I mean, I don't want to discourage, because I know a lot of people that have this same style raft. There's people in our group that have the same style raft, and it's been great. It's been great for them, and so I don't want to really talk too negative about it, but it's great to get the insight of the actual materials and what the differences are, because you start looking at these other rafts and you're like, why does that one cost 3 times as much as the one I got,
and sometimes some of that cost is just a name brand recognition thing. It really is. And sometimes those boats are something that really almost no one needs, so no, you did. I think you did really well at, and I wouldn't even call it an entry boat. I would call it a very high value to cost boat that you really can do a lot of things with, and reliably with. Yeah. And what tends to happen, though, it's the little things that creep up on you that you're not seeing, like those seams. And then, let's just say that happened out in the middle of nowhere on a moose hunt, on a fly out. Your trip just doubled.
Oh yeah.
So and it's either doubling to get you out of there, or tripling if you had to helicopter stuff out, but it's certainly doubling. So, hey, who are we going to call? Get another boat out here, and still the flight to get there and get the boat out, and on and on and on.
And then the weight of it, and then like you were saying, the geometry, because I would notice that my boat would not handle as well as some of other people's boats, and so I never even thought about the geometry of it, or why your guys' tube was way bigger than mine was, and I'm like, what's the differences?
Yeah, geometry's everything, and I know when Jack got his boat, and I think it was orange at the
it's orange. Yeah.
And I couldn't remember this year exactly what it was, but I knew it was a D series or the double D series, and I've always liked an E series, which those are all different geometries, and so your boat's made by AIRE. It's a U.S. manufacturer. Had a lot of know-how going into it before it ever even started that company, from working for all these other companies. So one of the things AIRE does really well is geometry. And so if you have a certain character of river and certain load, or certain passion for how you paddle or row or whatever, they've got the answer, and pretty surprising, really. Now, they are expensive boats, but when you think about that geometry and what you're doing, let's say it's steep creeking and boulder dodging and all that, getting those geometries makes all the difference in the world, because now you're working with the river easier. You're not getting exhausted. All of these your timing is going to be better. I mean, it's like driving a really good car or a truck compared to whoops, we're going back to the 70s. Got you where you wanted to go, but this truck rattles, it makes noise, and it spits out fumes, and
it doesn't have power steering.
Yeah, on and on and on. and
we call that the plow truck.
That.
Who's driving the plow truck?
So yeah, the geometry's everything, and then materials can be everything too. And that's not to say that all the materials don't have their attributes.
Yeah.
But certain materials are going to handle better than others, going to be slicker than others, and those do come at a cost.
Yeah.
So,
what would you say the life is on an AIRE boat?
The cool thing about an AIRE is that its outer skin doesn't have to hold any air at all, and so there are different generations of different fabrics that they've used. You can even actually select 2 different fabrics today. But the cool thing with AIRE, they figured out from working with all these other high-end brands, And in my guide service and my rental program, I mean, we've got 38 boats in the rental program. So it's, shepherding this all the time too. And they're turning and burning, going mild to wild all the time, all, basically from June till the end of September. So lots of different rivers, lots of different environments, lots of mileage. I have no idea if it's an absolute beginner at the oars that hits everything, or up to somebody that's super experienced and biting off maybe more than they can chew sometimes, and need the best they can be in. But what happens with a lot of boats is you get this cumulative effect of leaking by little scratches and little pinholes and little. So these aren't pinholes that you hear whistling at you, or you get near them and you go, oh, there's a leak there. And it's not a rip or a tear. What it is just this cumulative effect. Is if, maybe one scratch on the table you don't care about. But if you got 900 of them, nobody wants the table anymore.
Right.
And so that's what happens with most, even the highest end boats, is those little scratches and things will drive you nuts. But AIRE uses an unsupported bladder inside. So there's no scrim, there's no nothing. It's a welded bag, basically, inside this giant zippered duffel of cool geometry. And so you can scratch and dent the heck out of it. You could even cut the whole side as long as you didn't compromise the actual bag inside. It's literally a clear bag. Looks like you just put a vacuum pack meal in there, with no meal, and blew up your boat. And so the cool thing is that if you maintain your zippers, the stitching stays okay. You don't set your, sights on, I blew my boat up in 30 degrees and now it's 90 on a beach and I've just left it. Those kinds of things, because that bag will expand and it is captive in a static environment. So,
well, that's what happened to the little guy.
Oh, right.
The little guy, that's exactly what happened to it. I think it just was been cold and rainy, and I had that thing fully ready to go. Got hot this past weekend. Yeah. And it just, boom.
Damn.
I mean, we've woken up on the Gold Canyon, it's 34 degrees and gone all the way up to, 85 degrees.
Yeah.
So, it's just things you don't think about.
Sure.
So for that AIRE, could you actually pull that bladder out of the tube, throw another one in? And
yes, you could do that.
If you had a complete
and because
tear.
it's an unsupported material going in a skin, you tend to tape a lot of those issues. And if it was a massive thing, you could actually twist it like the top of a garbage bag, bend it over, zip tie it, stick it back in there, and it'd get you down the river.
What?
So if it was like super duper cold and nothing was sticking and the chips were really down and it's getting dark and you go, I'm in the middle of a canyon here, I got to get down to where I can camp someplace. Been there, done that. It's pretty cool. But you asked me how long an AIRE can last. If you keep your AIRE in good shape, again, different materials over different time, but I'm still, you could get into some 96, 97 boats that I still run for myself mostly, but sometimes I go out on moose hunts and I use them a lot for aircraft recovery. And they're from 96, 97, and you'd get in it and you'd say, did you buy this 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, let's get into kind of like I wouldn't say maintenance, well, maybe maintenance. And like, obviously we have a long winter here and I've always rolled mine up. I know some guys who don't, and they just kind of leave that thing on the trailer, uninflated. What is the proper care for taking care of your raft to get some longevity out of it?
Yeah. So, I have a lot of different rafts for different purposes, different sizes. And so I have Sotar rafts, which are all urethane, no bladders in them. That's more of a mil-spec type material. That's the stuff you might see on, literally boats that go to war, like on rib collars and things like that. So this is really stout stuff. And then I have the AIREs, different generations, different materials. I've got those NRS stars. And we have, a couple different types of different brands and different materials. We don't tend to run a lot of rubber boats. And it's not that I have anything against rubber boats. I started my career in rubber boats. The thing is, if you're going to be turning week in, week out boats, a rubber boat is, you're always going to be dealing with more repair type issues that take longer. And plastics are cool that way because you're dealing mostly with chemistry and quicker cure times and things like that. Where rubber, you're always mechanically repairing them. You're sanding them, and then you're just doing more. And also rubber tends to grab things on the river bottom. It's not as slippery. Yeah. And so you're gonna find people with a heavy load or overloaded sticking to a rock a little more, and then possibly doing some damage there, or getting it in and out of stairways on airplanes, which they're all sharp.
Yeah.
And if they bring it in a perfect roll, like a big hay bale, and it looks great and it goes in the plane.
That's almost impossible.
But sometimes they don't do that in the field coming back, and it comes in like a giant inchworm, and one guy's towing it up in, and the other guys are all pushing it from behind. And the next thing you know, it's caught on the stair, and nobody cares. And
it's like every tent sleeping pad ever. It's like this never goes back in this bag. Like, who designed this bag?
Exactly.
But rubber does have. If you were just doing nothing but Arctic trips, rubber does have some attributes there because it's going to roll and fold easier in the cold.
Yeah, totally.
Where those stiffer plastics are going to be tougher and tougher. And there's a couple just premier brands of rafts we really can't use in Alaska because you just can't fold them. You can't roll them. They won't go back in the airplane on a cold day.
Yeah.
If it's a hot day like today and it's just beating down on the boat, like you got a fighting chance of getting in a nice tight roll.
Yeah.
But if it's a cold day in the Arctic after a caribou or moose hunt, it's coming back like just a behemoth, and now you got an extra flight.
Yeah.
And so,
which isn't cheap.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but repair-wise, we like the plastics just because it's strictly chemistry at that point, and paying attention to those kinds of things, and it's going to be easier to explain that to somebody in the field too. Like, look, you're not out there sanding, you're not out there doing all these crazy things. It's like, no, here's your industrial solvent, here's your adhesives. These are the ways to go, and if you can trace and paint glue between the lines, you're going to get down with a plastic boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously you should put it away in the winter.
Yeah, so this is what I was going to get into after that. So there's different procedures for different boats, but in most cases, what I do, trip in, trip out, short term. So this is turning each week or 10 days or whatever. What I will always do is I will get a vacuum clean. I'll clean everything. I'll soap check it too. So I'll make sure that it is tidy and it is inspected, ready to go. Perfect. Then I'll let it dry if I have the opportunity to let it dry. If it's in the middle of summer and it comes back from a wet trip and I've washed it, soap checked and all that, it doesn't necessarily have to hit the river again, bone dry. But clean is absolutely key. That helps you discover what's going on with this boat over time. That's your first maintenance skill set, is making sure that it is clean after every use. And that even goes for on the river. A clean boat is a safe boat. So rinse it out every night. There shouldn't be the potato chips or the beef jerky or the nuts, twigs, and raisin mix or whatever you got going on there.
17 beer cans.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's because that all attracts squirrels, right? And those
Do you have tricks for the stitching?
So yeah, I do, and we'll get to that on the airboats because that's kind of a facet all alone for them. But keeping a boat clean and inspected and maintained is key. Then what I'll do is I'll vacuum all the air out. I'll just this thing is just absolutely sucked completely out. It's and then I go ahead and have the valves closed, so there's no suspension on that spring. So it's as if if you keep the valves open and locked open, that spring is like your truck suspension loaded down all the time.
Right.
But if you vacuum all that air out, most likely you've gotten a lot of the humidity out. You've gotten all the air out. You've probably got any kind of water that could have ingressed in there somehow or another.
Moisture and stuff.
Yeah. So you're getting rid of a lot of that microclimate that that greenhouse effect that could be going on in there, molds, mildews, on and on and on. So then I cap it, and the reason I cap it is that's extra redundancy. And the caps when I roll it aren't just getting rolled all over the place or cracked and mismanaged. And then I will go ahead and fold it, and I'll fold it in thirds.
Okay.
Yep.
And
lengthwise?
Yeah, lengthwise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll fold it in thirds first, and then I will, in that capacity, because I've vacuumed that boat out, I will start at the floor valve end, and I will go to the other end. And what that's doing is that's rolling that floor valve in so it can't die cut when it's deflated. If you're dragging it, or it goes into an airplane, or it's bouncing around in a truck. The valve is plastic and it's hard. And many valves are different. So some, I don't know if there's anything in this.
No, you can use that.
So some valves, when they're inside the boat, are this shape and they're down. So if that's against the material, and that's the outer part of your roll, and it goes here, it's going to die cut a perfectly circular hole.
Yeah, vibrating on planes and everything. Yeah.
Yep. And then some valves have sort of an ice cream cone-like look on the inside. And that does a lot less, but it does create a point, a little domed point. So you'll see that. It won't die cut, but it will rub on that point. You'll get that smaller surface area and that point load. Yeah. And it will do the same thing. So I, in this capacity, when I have the option, I will start at that floor valve in, and I will, once I've got it in thirds, then I'll roll it. And there's a mixed martial art, depending on the day and how you're feeling. But one
Come
of the
on, kid, jump on that side.
But I do
bows into it. Yeah.
But I do dedicate a strap that's different from the whole rest of the kit. And that will usually be an 1.5 inch strap, like typical belt size.
Okay.
And most of the rafts get it done in about an 8 or a 9 footer. You don't need like a 20 footer and then a tail that you're tripping over. And but sometimes to get it to that roll by yourself, what's happening is that those thirds are trying to
come up. Yeah.
So normally you're going to have some cargo straps on that trip, not just the ones that hold your frame to the boat or the extra oar up to the frame. You're going to have some 6-footers in there.
Yeah.
And for the boat like you're talking, that size, you can take a 6-footer and just not even a third of the way back of that other side that you're trying to work towards. Go ahead and strap it and keep that buckle just to the outside so you can access it again.
Gotcha.
Because when you're by yourself, how often it's like, hey guys, we're out here, the flight's gone, all the thing, and you're out there.
Yeah.
The last guy.
Yeah.
And so if you could work smarter, like when I was younger, I wouldn't care. I'd put my knees on one side and get her done, and gorilla will take it out to the airplane. Great. But as you get older, it is what it is. And what's that Toby Keith song? As good as I once was.
Yeah.
kind of a thing. That's a reality when you start rolling boat after boat after boat, God. And you're in a hurry and trying to be detailed. So putting that strap on, you can get it in there, and then everything's strapped on. If you want to get out of the field and leave that strap on, take it off later, that's fine. But most of the time, I will take that off because I'll rack it with the rest of them.
Gotcha.
But that's the way you store it.
Okay. Did you say the valve is closed?
All the valves are closed and the caps are on, and it's vacuum packed.
Okay.
So that's how I will also put them away.
Okay.
So every single time, like good habits on the river, once those habits kick in, it's just second nature.
Yeah.
And the people, honestly, that store them inflated, if you've got the space and you don't care much and you're kind of like, whatever, you can go ahead and do it.
That's a lot of space.
But never put it on a trailer outside in Alaska all winter. Then you're coming to see me in the repair shop a lot more often, and you could have catastrophic issues because freeze-thaw issues are horrible for every component on fabrication on your boat.
So when you say soap check, are you spraying the thing down with soapy water to check it, or are you washing it down with soapy water and then kind of looking at it as it glistens?
So what I'll do is I'll wash it so that I'm not looking at, a bug or a stick or a rock or mud on the side of the river that that's in
false
that boat
kind of thing. Yeah.
And so because suds will stick to that, right? So I can't see that. But what I'll do is I recommend to pretty much everybody get sort of a Ghostbuster backpack if you've got a bigger boat that is a plant sprayer.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And you fill that with a heavy duty bunch of Dawn dishwashings, but not flavor of the month. So just the Dawn, blue Dawn with a duck. And make it look like blue Gatorade though.
Okay.
Really pump it up and wander around the boat and just like you're spraying weeds. And what that will do is create a very, very fine mist Because if you're just trying to scrub a bubble,
Right. Yeah.
then it's hard to see the bubble that you might be looking for. And the lighter the boat,
Yeah.
a white boat and a white bubble are hard to find.
Bubbled up.
Yeah.
So do you stay away from all the other soaps for various reasons, or just Dawn's the one you got to win?
That's the one I use the most routinely because it's not an invasive chemical. It doesn't smell. It doesn't,
Gotcha.
it's if I've got a little bit of runoff here and there, it's about the safest soap that you're going to use. And you don't want that flavor of the month stuff because if your boat smells like a rose, well, there's or a berry.
Bear's coming.
Exactly. Something's really curious about that. The Irish Spring only works so long. You can't do that.
I heard mosquitoes and the Irish love that smell
the Irish,
as well.
yeah.
They just come running out of the woods.
Right. So but the soaping is important because you put that nice thin film and you walk away from your boat. Now, if you can't do this on a hot sunny day with the sun beating down, or that just flashes off, you can't see it. But you walk away, and the reason you walk away is that's going to give you the detail of what's a little foamer, what's a little bubbler, is that a scratch, is that a dent, is that a whatever, and you'd be surprised how many boat shops do not do that at all. And the boat comes back to me, and they go, well, those guys couldn't find anything. Well, I got 12 of them right here. You want to see them?
Yeah.
And I'll pull out my phone and show them, FaceTiming it kind of a thing is like, look at this. And the higher the pressure, the more you're going to see that.
Yeah.
So the other thing when you're inspecting a boat, don't be afraid. Like in your boat, you could take it up to 3 psi easily. You might not use it on the river at 3 psi, but even if you've inflated it going to the Kenai at 3 psi and stuck it in the Kenai River, it's not 3 psi anymore.
No way.
And but you might not leave it on your trailer on a hot day at 3 psi, or it could get quite a bit of percentage more, depending, on the hot day, or you drive over a mountain pass. All those kinds of things. But don't be afraid to put pressure in those kinds of boats to do an inspection. And you bring that boat up to shape first, then you really top it off with minimal deflection so it's firm, and then go ahead and do it, because otherwise you're missing things that aren't going to show up at 1.5 pounds, but certainly will show up at 3.
Gotcha.
We got a lot of altitude here too. I remember you fill up those things when they first came out for your neck on the plane, and then you'd have it nice and comfy. You'd wake up at 25,000-30,000 feet like someone's choking you. What's going on? Deflate. But you just don't realize it until it's in action.
Sure.
Man.
Sure. Well, most boats can take, probably 20 to 40% more pressure, believe it or not, as long as you're not on the river and hit a log or
1,000 pounds
things like that. And then some boats even have compensating valves where it'll actually have pressure relief, and a lot of floors have that.
The floors,
because your floors are very low pressure in some cases, and then on that boat that you guys use, that's a high pressure floor, so you're looking at low volume, high pressure. On the tubes, you're looking at high volume and pretty low pressures. Really. So
Nice.
How did you get into all this? We didn't even get to the history here.
So I grew up on the mountainside south of Anchorage, and it was back in the days when Rabbit Creek Road was still a dirt road, and all the roads pretty much off into the woods were a little better than Jeep trails, I suppose, but not much. Single lane or gravel roads with frost eaves and whatnot. And so we grew up in a place called Paradise Valley. And I don't even know if people living there know I was called Paradise Valley anymore. There's so many houses out there. I don't know if you'd ever. But Paradise Valley is opposite the Potter Valley. So if you look at, you're looking up the mountains from Anchorage, you see Rabbit Creek coming down McHugh. And the other creek that comes off the backside of McHugh is McHugh Creek that comes down on the Seward Highway. Well, the in-betweener is Potter Creek that feeds Potter Marsh. So the Potter Valley is considered the sort of the marsh side, and Paradise Valley is considered the other side.
Gotcha.
And then above that, there's the AIRE strip, and then on up, And they were all homesteads back then, and the old timers were still kicking and still doing that kind of stuff. And so slowly they were subdividing their lands. And nobody would build a house out there even at the time. And so my dad found a Latvian builder that said, I can do it. And so we built our house back in there, and sort of the rest is history. And we, grew up on the mountainside doing whatever I wanted to do. I mean, it was just the backyard just kept going. And so Mom would literally find me just making sure I didn't burn the entire hillside down. Oh, Daniel Boone's out there with a campfire again, roasting a squirrel or something. And so I always grew up having fun out there. One day I was Daniel Boone, the next day I was Davy Crockett. It depends on, what what was going on. Yeah. And so it was just an awesome place to grow up. And so eventually an Austrian guide moved up there, and this Austrian guide, his name was Sepp Weber, and he was one of the guys that really started pioneering a lot of these rivers in Alaska that had never been run. And he wrote a book, Wild Rivers of Alaska, and how he got here is, we're going back to the Gary King story. So Gary King, his big ski shop, and well, he needed somebody for a ski school because he was trying to sell skis and rent skis and on and on and on. And so Arctic Valley had a Gary King shop. Girdwood had a Gary King shop. Oh, yeah. And of course the one in town. So if you're going to sell more skis, you need more skiers. Yeah. And so he went to Europe and said, we need a European ski instructor here. And Sepp happened to be a mountaineering and skiing instructor, and moved him to Girdwood. And then, of course, in the summer, Sepp was like, I've been kayaking and doing all these adventures, and Sepp's about 90-something now. So he went through World War II in Austria, and after the war, every man was down and depressed and no work and no money, and so the young kids were just kind of all sharing a van and said, let's go to these other countries and go boating and go exploring and go mountaineering and hiking. So that's how he how he had his skill set and comfort zone. I mean, stuff like kayaking the Sea of Japan when there were no kayaks. Just amazing stuff. And so when he came to Alaska, though, he needed something obviously to do in the summertime. He couldn't ski instruct all year long, and so he started a guide service. And it was called Alyeska Wilderness Guides. He started out with kayaks, hard-shelled kayaks, that he would, because he couldn't put them in the plane, like all the kayaks were big back then. So he would cut them in half and then cut them in half again, and he'd stack them all like eggshells. And he would stick them in a plane, and he would fly out a day or two early and re-fiberglass all these things.
Oh my God.
And then the customers would show up, and back then nobody was just flying the average bush plane. I mean, these were Grumman Gooses and whatever people had, and it's like, where do you want to go? What kind of river do you want to do? And so he would spend this day. Well, he realized that most people, he couldn't guarantee that they could kayak.
Yeah.
And a multi-day river could have easy stretches and hard stretches, and you had to haul your load with you. And so not everybody had an Eskimo roll. And, you pretty much fiberglassed yourself out, so how are you going to repair them now? So a lot, and then you got to tear them apart again just to get them back. So a lot of downtime. So then he started with Kleppers, which were...
Kleppers?
Yeah, Kleppers were a folding kayak.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
They're very expensive, actually, if you find old
They
used
fold
ones.
taco style?
Yep.
So, no, they're all ribbed, wooden ribs.
Okay.
And they have a canvas top and a Hypalon rubber bottom.
Yeah.
And so anybody that's, kind of into the classic kayak knows the German Klepper, because these were known for, all over the world to do incredible adventures.
Yeah, man, Freddie has one.
Yeah, they're remarkable boats, really. I mean,
here's an image I pulled up here.
When you put one together, you're like, oh my God, what am I getting into? But they're very, very capable boat.
That's them right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
And so they all have wooden ribs in them, so you have to build the ribs, and it's basically a skin boat.
Yeah.
And so of course the thing is, he had these multi-day loads and these multi-paddlers. Now he could get them in the airplane. They were heavy and bulky, but they were packable. Yeah. The problem is, you go over gravel and rocks with your load in there, it's like a drum skin. You just rip them out.
Yeah.
So he, sewing and duct tape finally got old, and so there was a tire company in in West Germany at the time called Metsler, and they still make like high-end, motorcycle tires is what they're kind of made up for. But over in Europe, they're like big tractor tires. I mean, they're the Goodyear of West Germany, kind of a thing. And so they put out a synthetic rubber boat on the outside, but a natural rubber boat on the inside, and they vulcanized it just like putting tire tread on a tire. Wow. So it's not glued or anything.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So way stronger than glue, but way more complex should you have a problem, because you can't glue it.
Yeah.
Totally. But he had these Metslers, and they had a little fiberglass cockpit. So now he rolled the boat up, and the fiberglass cockpits could be sewn in. Mm-hmm. And actually, when you think about it, it's just incredibly, it's I-beam floor on it. The whole boat looks just like the floor on your raft. Okay. Except it's vulcanized rubber. It had to be natural rubber on the inside.
Yeah.
And it was fully decked. So it was really cool. I mean, even on today's level of things, it's incredibly innovative, and the geometry is amazing.
Yeah. Probably way before its time. Huh?
Way before its time. And they had weird tests where they would, because it was a tire factory, so they would test them, and they'd have a piston that would push it in the water and go, yep, it holds air. Nobody does that now. They just go, oh, does it hold air for 48 hours, 72 hours? Great, send it out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these were...
Do you think we could find that on Google? The Metsler?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And most of them were orange, and a few of them were sort of OD green. And but the kayak that I grew up in was called a Metsler Spezi, spelled S-P-E-Z-I-L, which just meant the large. Huh. And my head would just barely stick out of the cockpit. I'd be
That's a raft.
That's so funny. That's crazy. You can see the ribs and the lines on that one. It's like there's not a lot to it.
Yeah, you wouldn't
roll it out, put it on.
Okay, so these are Metsler rafts.
All right.
And then if you looked at the kayaks, you would find the similar.
Oh, they were kayaks. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, because rafting these rivers was not quite practical yet. Not enough people were doing it. Most Americans weren't going out there at all.
Yeah.
And
they got like the big rubber nose ones.
Now, interestingly, this one here in the center is Grabner, and that's where the patent finally went to Austria. And this,
that's
a Gary King one.
That was a copy of it, because he had so many European customers.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, but the copy was interesting because it was PVC, not vulcanized, and they'd all fall apart very quickly.
Yeah.
There was a few things lost in translation there, but
good thing they were just doing Campbell Creek.
Those are cool.
So yeah, they were very, very cool boats, and so now he had a roll-up option that was sturdy, that if somebody did rip one, he just put a patch on it and away you go.
Yeah.
But the problem that he faced was that you still kind of needed a kayak. You were limited on gear, so you weren't really going to take steak and eggs on this trip. And he's like, how do I put more people in a boat?
Yeah.
And so that's when the double-ending raft, and double-ended rafts were kind of just getting going too. And so that's when all the Avon rafts started going, and they were bucket boats. They didn't self-bail. You had to...
Right.
And there, believe it or not, a few of those boats still in the water from
the 70s.
Really? They have incredible longevity.
Wow.
And so that's actually... I ended up working for him when I was 14 as an apprentice, boatman. And so I would start the days by obviously loading bush planes. I would, back then they just stuffed you in the bush plane on top of the gear. He's small enough, he's athletic enough, get him in the bed, no seat belts, no nothing. They're just laying up against the ceiling there, head facing the tail, and you just fall asleep. But then I would, haul people and gear down the river, and then at the end of the day, it was kind of help clean and cook and take out the garbage. The typical boatman apprentice kind of thing. So I started when I was 14, and I was doing like Talshalitna and Lake Creek, a lot of back-to-back rivers that I got to know. But what's cool is he was one of those guys, you got to go out and learn. You got to go out and figure it out for yourself, and it was cool that he just gave me that latitude to, because when you're 14, 15, you think you know it all, right? So that confidence is high at 14, 15, but you don't know anything yet. Yeah. But you are, athletic, and you do recover quickly, and you learn quickly.
Can still swim to shore fast.
So the beauty of it is he pretty much just gave me a lot of latitude with guides that, also said, hey, you're the boatman. Wow. And it was to the point, even 15, 16 years old, there's the big rapid, flip a coin, who's going? And, so it was great that he gave me those experiences early on, and they really stuck, because that's when my ski racing career started to really take off. So now I had, the summer and the winter programs, and gosh, I'm still doing it. It's obviously a little different than just grinding your way down the river anymore. I'd love to be guiding every single week, but times have changed too. So I had to diversify to have the rental program and the repair program, and do some of the instructional sorts of things, and so it's just kind of evolved from apprentice years to full-on guiding everything to now the diversification of where we're at now.
When did you leave and start Alaska Raft Connection?
So I started that after I graduated college. So started that in '93.
All right.
Wow.
And you've been in my parking lot. You probably wonder, why is there a '93 F350 here and a '93 Dakota in here?
Because there's thousands.
Because that's when it all started. That's when it all started. And so that purple truck is my '86 high school truck.
Nice.
And that's kind of what I got everything going with. And so it's funny. It's I just rotate those trucks around, and everybody gives me a rough time. Brian, are you ever going to go join the modern world here? I was like, no, these trucks seem to work still. But started at '93, and it was. Gosh, the heydays in the 80s and the 90s were just fantastic guiding years. And, you could go down Lake Creek, for example, and every man would be fighting a 55-pound king. No exaggeration whatsoever. And they might not bring that home in their cooler, but they would be riding their pole and winching on that thing until they got it. Yeah. And nowadays you'd be, the genetics might be there, but you're gonna have a lot smaller fish, and it's just climate change and everything else. So you couldn't Alaska. It's interesting. They're selling Alaska nowadays based on what we accomplished in the 80s and 90s, because it was such good times. And it's
not the same.
I'm super happy that I got to see that time of Alaska, because there's I know there's a lot of old, they're pushing 100, but there's guys out there that would say statehood's the worst thing that ever happened. We did whatever we wanted to do. We went wherever we wanted to go. And there's probably a level of truth to that too, with every generation. But when I look back and we see just being an 80s kid here in Alaska is just unbelievable.
It was the greatest.
It really, and that's not to say you can't do that today, but it's going to cost you more, and it's going to be, you might not be out there as often, and things like
yelled
that.
at.
You might run into some other people.
You get yelled at a little bit more.
Right. No. So, but I still totally have the same passion. It's even if we're talking shop on boats or whatever. I'm so happy that I'm still being able to do my own thing.
Hell yeah. Are you still guiding?
Very rarely. If somebody says, hey, we go on your website and we see everything about the ANIAC check, and it sort of ticks the boxes, and then we go to everybody else and they have no clue, even though they're advertising it. And that's not a dig or anything. You have to go out there often enough, and you have to get turned back trying to get there often enough. And but there are some things like that are totally awesome. Awesome trips. But a lot of those trips back in the day, in the heydays, I'll say up till about 2005-ish, I would say, and then the heydays started to kind of oh, wait a minute, things are changing. And either they're getting more restrictive, or the costs are going up, or all of those kinds of things, and not necessarily what I would make doing it. Is it worth my while to go out there? But just the cost of the everything, every hand in it before you ever get into going out and doing what you're doing. So you better line up more than a couple of guests for one exclusive. You better take a few trips down that
Logistics
river.
are just all crazy, yeah.
And so, so if you said, am I going to go to some really cool places, or would I go to Lake Creek with a group that says, this is a little too much for us, but we want to go out there and check it out, and then, that feeds the rentals. If they're comfortable and they gain a skill set and learn something, then they're like, oh, hey, we got this time.
Yeah.
Awesome. So it's all working
Is Lake
together.
Creek pretty aggressive floating down that from that's one of the trips that's on my bucket list is I've been up in my jet boat a little bit, but I didn't know anything about it, and I was by myself. It was late in the year, and I was like, and it's a 20-foot jet boat. I'm like, I'm turning around. Like, I don't know anything about this one. So, but I heard people drop in, and then they float Lake Creek, and then they pop out right at what they call, I think, the German hut or something, where the
lodges are. At the
the
end
lodges,
of
and there's that dock there and stuff, and it gets murky.
Well, what's cool about Lake Creek, I mean, I kind of explained that this is where I cut my teeth, it's at 14, 15, 16. I mean, it was 5, 6, 8 trips a year down there, just boom, 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 and so this last trip, you probably saw it on my Facebook, that was the 170th trip.
Wow.
But, it's such an awesome place. I'd go there tomorrow. If you guys were all game, let's go.
Yeah.
Because it's got everything. And back in the 80s and 90s, you might be the only English-speaking person out there. It was all Swiss, all Germans.
Really?
All the lodges, when you got down to the very bottom, if you said, hi, guys, they'd be like,
Heisa.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Wie geht's, whatever, So anyway, so that was what made Lake Creek.
Okay.
And it's interesting when you look at some of the history too, and nobody likes to admit it, but that's really what made a lot of these smokehouses. Alaska sausage, all these just off because you had all the Germans and the Swiss and their exchange rates were right for the dollar at that time, and then when that sort of started to fall off, the Japanese, of course, were buying up so many of the things here, but they only had about 3 days off a year. All the Germans and the Swiss had 30 days off a year. Big difference.
Yeah.
So that then became the quick Lake Creek trip. So instead of 5 day, 4 nights, 7 day, 6 nights, you had the 3-nighter, or something like that. And they would have all a blast and stuff. They would still see the same river and all that, but it just wasn't the same. And they weren't trying to fill coolers. It was the Europeans would all come down and they'd try to fill coolers at the end.
Yeah.
The Japanese would try to eat every fish per night they could.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a completely different mindset.
Totally.
So and nowadays, of course, we're all catch and release and don't put that, So,
Keep it in the water.
Oh, it's a rainbow.
but Lake Creek's
things
awesome.
change.
And if you said to me, would I guide trips on Lake Creek? Absolutely. But would I, guide trip on the Gulkana? No. It's a good river too. Would I guide anything on the Kenai? Absolutely not. That's going to feed the rental, the do-it-yourself kinds of things, because that's the place to cut your teeth to get going and see more.
Yeah.
And but Lake Creek's got the logistics are so awesome. It's so fun, and that you're getting out on this day, and you're coming back on this day, and so if somebody's on a tight schedule and budget-wise, I kid you not, it's like that trip has. Since all these days, even since let's say 2005, 2006, you could probably do that trip for about $2,500 to $2,800 a guy. Now it's $6,500 a guy. Same trip.
Wow.
Nothing's changed. And but the attraction maybe for the big 55-pound king is no longer there, especially when it's closed.
Yeah.
So. But at the same time, when all those are closed, I do my little winter solo thing, in October every year. When everything's done, I keep one boat out, and or I do a boat test, and I do my solos every year out there. It's a blast. It's a blast.
Catching
there's not a
silvers.
soul out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ice is basic. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But like Jack, you'd love it. I've known you long enough. You'd be like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And it's not like you catch fish on every cast, but when you really know the river, there's apex fish in every hole, and they're all quality, they're all big, but there's only 6 in that hole.
Yeah.
There's not 15 to 50.
Right.
And so so you just keep moving, and you got really short days. You could camp on 6 inches of snow, so you're like out there tromping your camp down and hugging your stove and your freeze dried meal. Oh, this is a hand warmer and a foot warmer. But it's that's one, if it was local and one that you would say, oh yeah, would I go there every day of the week? Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you like it more than the Gokena?
I think just because Lake Creek starts out in just a beautiful mountain lake. So picture Kenai Lake, but right on the Alaska range.
Yeah.
Just boom, all the mountains are sticking up. And there's some lodges and some cabins around it, but they're kind of irrelevant because you're on the river that day. And then there's no way, and you've been out there in the jet boat, there's only so far you can climb up there in a jet boat. So once you've left the lake, you're on your own. Yeah, and there's no place to land on you unless you're bringing a helicopter.
Yeah.
And then all the rock dodging and puzzle solving and different character rapids is so fun. Yeah. It's just so fun.
Does it get wide? Like when I went up it,
in some places it does.
Okay. When I went up in a 20-foot jet boat, it was like narrow. There's logs digging in. I'm going up. I'm taking on water. It's like September, and I'm going. And literally it was like frost on my tent the next morning. I went up. Yeah. Northern Lights, beautiful. Wolves howling. Like, it was just gorgeous out there.
Yeah.
But
so go a little further up, and then it's just going to get that much exponentially cooler.
Cool. It looked tight. I was like, man, the water was a gorgeous, greenish blue. That was awesome.
Yeah.
What was that book that you mentioned that?
Sepp wrote Wild Rivers of Alaska.
Okay.
And it's kind of a collector's item book.
Okay.
It would be rare to find that, but it is findable. And if somebody has one, you're probably going to have to play tug of war.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's just people that know the history of Alaska and rafting and river running. And Sepp was high skill set and didn't need anything out in the field to do it. And at 90, he'd hike anybody, probably me, easily. I'm not much of a hiker necessarily, but I mean, this guy is a little tank.
Yeah.
But he doesn't need anything. That's the cool. And he's not one of these, I'm an alone guy and I'm on a survival channel. Nothing like that. Just like, nope.
It's an old grinder.
Really, really self-sufficient, self-reliant, and can do anything. I mean, if you said, hey, you needed to build this house, he could probably get a couple of rolls of duct tape, some nails, and some planks, and all of a sudden there's stucco wall showing there. And you're like, how did this happen? So really a very interesting character to work for. But the coolest thing is he just gave me the freedom to do and learn.
Yeah.
And never was critical. I could tell him a story about how the river came up or how the fishing was, and just didn't faze him. It's like, go out there and do it again.
Yeah.
And towards the later part of my apprenticeship, we ended up pioneering some stretches in the Brooks Range that had never been trekked.
Oh, really?
And some of those lakes actually that we trekked from don't exist anymore.
Wow.
So in geologic time, the short amount of time, those lakes are gone.
Wow.
The rivers are still there, but we would do multi-mode treks to rivers, and some of the places that we put in are no longer even there.
Wow.
So it's cool. A lot of pioneering days.
Yeah.
Back then.
I had no idea how many glaciers, like you're saying, lakes are disappearing, rivers are changing, right? We've been doing the Gokena since 2009, and every year it changes, and finally the King Hole dried up, right? So Daniel can't go in that anymore.
It's amazing.
But,
it's amazing how fast it's changing, too. Like,
the high melt years. But there's all these glaciers. There's like over 100,000 glaciers in the world or something. Most of them are in Alaska, and a lot of them don't have names. I had no idea about that fact, and I was like, man.
You could start a name your glacier.
Yeah.
The star.
Buy your glacier. Yeah.
Get it quick. They're diminishing.
Well,
I named that year.
Yeah, that's right.
Sure you did.
Yeah, just put a post on it. Yeah, just like the old days where they what is it, Petersville, where people used to just put their posts out, and then they went and actually surveyed and go, oh, like half of your cabin's mine.
Yeah,
and then, like they finally geo-surveyed it.
Right,
like,
they drew it in with a crayon.
Like, had no idea. No, sounds like the guy you learned from was a lot like Carl Ide, the guy that did the ski jumps.
They were very good friends.
I mean, a wealth of knowledge. And these guys, I mean, they hone their craft. They'd be like, run across the yard. And you'd run and be like, you're never going to be an Olympic runner, but you can do this, this, and this very well. And you're like, you don't even know that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You just tell it by just watching you
and
run.
Carl Ide's son, Mark Ide's probably one of the best skiers ever out of Alaska. But, you know, how many know that unless you were a skier?
Yeah.
But, I mean, incredibly talented guy. And you know, it's so yeah, a lot of, I mean, those are the guys that really just started opening up Alaska and making those opportunities for our age group.
Totally.
You know, I mean, I don't know how old you are now.
So I'm 42. I'll be 43 next month, August 31st.
And how about yourself?
I'm be 45 this year.
Yeah, so I got 10 years on you. I'm 55 now.
But I grew up in Bear Valley, and let me tell you, dude, it was the Wild West before. It was only troopers, no cops, and man, we had, like you're saying, a backyard. Next thing you know that person, and then that person's kid knows you, and it was so much fun growing up back in the hillside. Because, like you said, I would go out and I would just be like, I'm going camping, and I'd be frying a squirrel, cooking a squirrel, doing whatever, middle of nowhere, chasing moose around, climbing trees. And
well, you were just literally on the other side of the airstrip from me.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally. We'd go to that airstrip all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they landed on that thing sometimes because the wind. So we were up there in a four-wheeler back when we were like 13. And I thought my buddy's throwing rocks at me. Shale rocks were getting picked up and whistling at us, and it hit me and cut me. And I thought my buddy did it, so I'm yelling at him. And he's like, no. And then another one hit me, and we're ducking behind the four-wheeler, and then we had to roll back down. But we went up there in a Nissan Pathfinder, an old 86, way back in the day. It was just so cool. And it's all blocked off now.
Yeah, now it's
people yell at you, and it's cell towers now.
Well, yeah, people used to land there. I don't think you're allowed to land anymore.
Oh, okay.
But you know, just like the three-wheeler, four-wheeler thing, I had, you know, everybody says, well, what was your first car, Brian? And it was an 8-wheel drive Argo.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't the $20,000, $30,000 Argos. I mean, these things were like $5,000 back then.
Right. Yeah.
You know, basketball tires and a bathtub with a small engine, you know, kind of a thing. But they would climb.
Oh, they did?
They would climb. And I basically had gone all the way up into McHugh and all over those places. Places where you'd get out of the vehicle and go, oh my God, I can't do this. Dude. It's going to kill me if I tip this over.
The bears looking
it's
at
not
you
that
like,
bad. You know, keep going. You know?
Not even the bears can get you. They're like, no, that guy's gone.
But you're right. The winds there are so awesome up on that airstrip.
Oh, yeah.
That's like if you want to do a wind test on a tent.
Oh, yeah.
That's where it's at.
Nut one down there and see how you fare.
You're going to Kasugi, go test your stuff up here for a minute. And it's just like, yeah. I mean, large rocks are flying at you.
Absolutely.
It was very impressive.
That's crazy.
Absolutely.
And there's a helipad up there by, Honey Bear Road, kind of the trail. There's like, someone's got a helipad up there. I saw on the sat map.
Yeah, he wants to be seen from outer space. He's a huge place, giant deck, and
rugby field.
That place. It's pretty cool, but
he's going to see me one day. I'm just going to go there and just hit the SOS button and lay down. Come get me. Bring a six-pack.
Brian, what would you say would be some resources that people that are maybe been into rafting or they're trying to get into rafting as far as figuring out what rivers to do? I know that I personally did a lot of looking up at, I want to say her name is Jetmar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Karen.
Her book is really great. She names many rivers and the takeouts and what to look out for. I forget what the name of her book is, but Karen Jetmar is the author.
Yeah.
Is there any other ones as far as like you can check water levels, or I know hers is one of the main ones, but is there something else that comes to mind? Is there a website or what?
Jetmar was really, I mean, she was a guide and did a lot of, and she really liked Arctic trips, Brooks Range trips and whatnot. But, what Karen was good at was definitely researching all the rest of the books and saying, hey, maybe I hadn't been on all these rivers, but, let's figure out what maps, what species, what. So she was very good with pooling a lot of the intel. And back then it was all books. You didn't have the internet when she started writing those books.
Totally.
And so she really did a lot of due diligence as far as figuring that kind of stuff out. And, and back then we didn't have GPSs. We didn't have, so you wanted quadrangles. You wanted all that. So, she had different versions of this book that would come out, little updates or, whatever. But most of them are pretty much saying the same thing in the same, same places. I would say today, and this isn't a bag on any author writing a book, but I'd say books on this sort of thing, and we talked about the changes. The changes are just so significant in the last 5 to 15 years compared to the last 40 before that.
Yeah.
And because of climate change, because of, you see it in, the good canaries in the coal mine are the king salmon struggling. Or the caribou herd struggling. And, to get off topic a little bit, the way you wipe out species is, let's have a lot of high water and kill off all the eggs. And put a lot of siltation in and make sure that the little guys can't make it back to the sea. If you look at all the big red salmon runs right now, and for some reason you don't see this a lot in the news, but you should. And it's just, I guess these guys aren't getting out enough. But the reds go to a very controlled environment. They don't care if it's high water for the most part. They actually swim sometimes faster in the high water. So they get up there. And they spawn in a lake. It's a controlled environment. They're not on some little gravel mountain tributary that's volatile. And the other thing is that these lakes are getting warmer. Our rivers are getting warmer. So what's going on is, from an egg phase to a little tiny fishy phase, they got more to eat. They got more stuff in that warm lake than they have ever had before. And some of those fish are probably going, I'm big enough, I'm heading to the sea. So now you've got, all sorts of generations that should have spent more time in the rivers and the lakes shooting for the sea because I'm big enough and I'm going to make it in the sea. Whereas before they were too small and they would be easy prey. But the kings, you basically wiped out their eggs and their little ones. It doesn't take many years of that. Very few, 10 to 12, and all of a sudden, whoosh, and it might not ever come back. The genetics might be there, but the numbers aren't going to be there. And so that's what you're seeing with the kings. And then with the chums and the silver populations, you're starting to see kind of the same thing. But so places that were, home of the fighting chum, kind of a thing. That was their, and those chum actually fed the rainbows in that river. Well, now you got a Costco processor sitting out in front of that river that's got all the chums. Well, what are the rainbows going to eat? And so then they eat themselves. They get a little like pike. They start eating themselves. They eat themselves out of house and home, and then you crash that. And it takes a long time to rebuild that. And it's the same with the caribou. The succession of vegetation is a big one. So now there's malnutrition because there's not, they're not the kids in the candy store on the tundra eating what they want to eat anymore. And so malnutrition and fewer young and on and on and on. So those are good indicators. And we kind of got off topic there. I'm not exactly sure how we started on that one, but
no, I've noticed it. Just, not even being like a crazy fisherman, there's guys that are very in tune with it, but just on the Gold Canyon, just on the Gold Canyon between the kings and the amount of we've caught 2 Jack Kings in the last 3-4 years, and then that king hole completely boarded up with all the logs from, like you're saying, the high melt. Now they can't even get back to that spot. And
it's weird. It's weird how the copper is doing better than everything else. Because we had those really bad years on the copper for kings, on the Gold Canyon and all those tributaries, and the last 2 years have been pretty good comparatively. Where this South Central stuff is brutal. We grew up as the 90s, 80s, late 80s, 90s kids here, fishing, and my favorite river from king fishing, you can't even catch her and lease anymore, and it's remote, it's just wild.
It's crazy, And then the pike came in, and obviously we're invasive and ate a bunch of stuff, but it's just it's not like they got overfished commercially, the kings. I feel like when I commercial fished, we caught maybe 5 kings out in Chicknick, and one was 70 something crazy pounds, and you let it go and stuff. But you didn't really see that many out there in all the salmon runs between the salmon sharks and everything else. But in the rivers, you can tell, you can totally tell, okay, this is where they hang out. Here's this. And then they're just gone.
Did you see many on Lake Creek?
Those,
What's that?
Did you see many on Lake Creek?
Well, on this last trip, we were doing a short, trip because I had to obviously get back to, get rentals and whatnot out. But, the first couple of days we were actually mousing.
Yeah.
We didn't need to be
Nice.
mousing, but
Yeah.
we were
Well, why
having
not?
fun mousing.
Yeah.
and my buddy Reed, who's just a fantastic artist, I mean, just of notoriety for sure. And he made these mice with painted white backs.
Oh, all right.
So you can see the mice.
Yeah.
But the mice look like mice to the other fish, and so we had a lot of fun on that. And I was at the oars most of the time, and it's a single hook only place, so you can't run droppers and things like that.
Yeah.
So big mouse, you're hoping to get a big trout or big
Yeah.
grayling, and you know how trout really will hit hard like this, and grayling will roll up and take it like that. So it was really really fun, and we didn't see any kings in the beginning, so we weren't going to bother with beads or any kind of eggs or any of that, and the reds hadn't come in yet up that high. And we got a couple tributaries down, and I was just messing around as I was literally watching the river just. I'm like, well, better get my fishing in now, and so hooked into jacks.
Oh, okay.
So there's likelihood of bigger kings in there, but since the main river was coming up and all the other small side streams were blowing out,
Yeah.
those big kings were just going, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't taste like a real venture up this creek right now.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just kind of hang in a pool where we can. So we didn't see any big kings to speak of. And, I was hoping that we'd get into some of those spots that they're just laid in like cordwood and go, yep, they're here, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But we didn't. The river's too flooded.
Lake Creek does reds, silvers.
Yeah.
At least I saw silvers jumping right on the outside of where those lodges are going into Lake Creek. But I don't know if they actually go into it.
Yeah, they do. The silver strategy, they'll get up through out the river, but they don't necessarily have to go too far.
Oh, okay.
And same with pinks, same with chums. They'll get up
And they
about
go up there
mid-river
too.
and call it good.
So you go up Lake Creek, and then somewhere like halfway up, it starts getting like bouldery, rapid, all that, and then that's
Yeah.
where you have to stop in a jet boat, I assume.
Oh,
right?
yeah. It's not that a skilled jet boater might not be getting up it,
Yeah.
but coming down,
Oh,
you do some damage. And even in the fancy Russian jet boats,
I was gonna say our buddy's got
Oh, yeah.
Peters has got
One of
these
the
solars,
solars.
and I've been watching them. And my girlfriend's uncle, who does a lot of moose hunting up top, up in Fairbanks and stuff around there, he's got one of those solars, and like there's stuff they're going down, man. Like class 4 rapids, 3 rapids. It's
crazy.
insane.
and of course that's why I see a fair number of them in the repair shop.
I believe it.
Yeah, and they
totally.
watch the Russian videos, and these guys are like mud bogging in $80,000 tour eggs. So this is like almost mafia going. Let's go boating that week. And the engines are flying, and they're jumping rocks. It's impressive, and they're doing it in the Altais, which is. Incredible, just, like Alaska or the deep parts of Montana. But we try that here, and all of a sudden we realize we're not mud bagging and, the tour eggs, and we're not, we're not get another motor next,
They have those polymer jet foots, and someone's like, yeah, they're really cool. He's like, snapped mine the first time. And he's like,
but the idea is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
And,
one of them's a video of some guys getting rescued down in like Sitka, Ketchikan, flipped over in a solar. One's still on the raft upside down, and the other guy's on shore. They're getting picked out. Yeah, but it's aggressive looking. I mean, they're coming down backwards till they can turn in these jet, and they unchain the motor. So the motor's just going
rocking and rolling.
Every time it hits.
But in a hard shell boat, unless you're in a mini jet, it'd be tough. It'd be really tough coming back down.
It was high water in the Gulcan this year. We saw a mini jet go above the weir and blow by, and
they definitely went above the legal area.
Yeah,
they went into the wild and scenic portion 100%.
Yeah, it was like this guy and his kid just with these earphones, like looking at us
on the back.
You're having your morning coffee, going and relieving yourself, and you're like, no one's coming from the bottom of the river because it's wild and scenic. And this guy, and I'm just waving at him, holding my stuff,
just ripping.
He's like driving by, and I'm just like 1 and 1,
you were talking about the books, right? And this is a perfect illustration how they're getting phased out, these river journals, because in a wild and scenic river, on your GPS with these different apps and programs, you would know instantly where you are.
Yes.
You know, if everything's working and you're applying your technologies correctly.
Yeah.
A book's not going to do that for you.
Right.
No.
And so let's say, you know, just like some hunting and fishing, like you're going to really plan some of these trips. You know, that's just incredible intelligence for you to have. It's not perfect, but, you know, where are the fish likely to be? Where is the game likely to be? What is worth hiking into? What is worth boating?
Oh, yeah.
The flip side of that, no pun intended, is that, you know, a trip that I used to do a lot in the fall was the Kabuk River.
Oh,
and this was when we would, you know, do some moose hunting and some
Sheefish.
some sheefish.
Yeah, those things are monsters.
I've seen you with some monster sheefish.
yeah, some big old hens. You know, they're just 6 feet long. It's an amazing trip,
like sturgeon or something.
And we do that in September. So you know, we'd make sure that the fish were thick by then, and the moose were, you know, in full thing. And what we started to notice also, the caribou were later and later and more unpredictable. And it's funny because we would always, like, you know, we need to see your papers, and I'd show my papers to the troopers. They had a trooper camp there to keep the peace between the villagers and anybody coming down the river. They'd greet you with AR-15s and shotguns, and it's like you're just hoping it's not too windy and your paper goes out of your anybody's hand. So I would you know, provide those papers, but that trip starts in Walker Lake. Or at least our version of it started in Walker Lake. And the moment you leave Walker Lake, it goes from absolute glass to a horizon line that just gone.
Oh, wow.
And it's a good class 4 rapid at most water levels. And if there's no water in it, it's basically fault line type rock it's basically the shape of it. If you just took all the water off and you stacked a bunch of radial saw blades forward. So most rivers, you know, going through the rocks and it's curled down the river. This is all spiked up the river. Oh, wow. So very grabby stuff. And there's actually crevasses in those where it's folded over.
Yeah.
So if you thought I think on a shallow thing, you know, wade as far as I can, you're very likely to get sieved in and wedged in.
Wow.
So you don't want to get out of a boat and think you're going to drag in this rapid because it could be your last.
Yeah.
Or you cut the boat to shreds. Any boat. Any boat.
Yeah. Wow.
But at big water, all of a sudden it has serious power and, you know, 10-foot haystacks. And so when you're in the trough, you could be looking up at a serious, you know, wave, and there's a big rock in a pocket there that has incredible suction.
Jesus.
So, you know, you could be doing planning, and you could go, oh, looks like some waves in there. And that's that day. That's that day when the satellite said, ching. Or you could even get a winter picture, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you know, it couldn't be that bad. It's all white down there, you know. Yeah. And so that's not a great indicator. And I remember one guy, he was wanting to do a do-it-yourselfer, and for some reason he found an article of me holding a sheefish and decided he'd give me a call. And he put on Facebook, you know, what do you guys all think about this? And everybody said, oh, you know, we looked on Google Earth and blah, blah. It was nice. It was like, And I said, first of all, that's from outer space, and you're actually seeing a rapid. So it's significant.
That's a beast.
Yeah. And second of all, you're going to get a lot of looks. And if it's really high water and you got no horizon line, look out. And so he was a good boater. He asked the right questions, but he took measures to try to avoid everything. And that gave back to me and said, Brian, thank God you didn't tell me just look at Google Earth like everybody else. And so there are a lot of rivers like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
well, and I mean, day to day, too, you know, it's like Alaska has power, it's cold, and it's silty. It can fill you up, drop you to the bottom. It can hit you, and it can freeze you. Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, it's 85 degrees. It's so great, you know, and then you jump in the ocean, you're fixing a prop on the boat, and it's 40-degree water, 50, 45-degree, and it just sucks the life right out of you. And people are like, oh. And a lot of people, I forget what river it was, but they get in it, not including the copper, the chitna. They're just super powerful and deep canyons. Mm-hmm. But some rivers where you get in and, like, someone was talking the other day, they didn't have a wader belt. And I'm like, you need a wader belt because you are just going to right to the bottom. Yeah. And luckily, he did fall in, but he didn't get sucked to the bottom. Mm-hmm. And he had, like, a kayak. And he's a new guy, you know. And I'm like, oh, dude.
Well, you got to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Oh.
How's your trivia?
What's that?
How's your trivia game?
I have no idea. I haven't played in a while, I guess.
Okay, well, we're going to find out.
Getting
We're going to take a
better.
quick break, and we'll come back with some trivia.
Yeah, cool.
Getting better every sip.
Big Ray's, the Alaskan outfitter, committed to outfitting Alaskans across the state since 1947. Whether you're a recreator, parent, guide, or corporate buyer, Big Ray's has the gear you need tailored for Alaska's harsh conditions. At Big Ray's, you'll find brands like Carhartt, Grundens, Darn Tough, FXD, Okiwear, and more. Big Ray's is your one-stop shop for both outdoor gear and rugged work attire. Check out their new exclusive line of durable but affordable waders, inspired by and named after the majestic Aralek River in remote western Alaska. The Aralek wader was designed by Alaskans and proven for the diverse waters of the last frontier. Visit Big Ray's at any of their 5 locations statewide, 2 in Anchorage, 2 in Fairbanks, 1 in Kodiak, or check them out online at bigrays.com.
Tailored Restoration, helping Alaskans turn disasters into new beginnings since 1972. Their 24-hour services include fire, water, mold, post-emergency cleaning, and repairs. Tailored built its reputation with years of committed and reliable service to the community with innovative restoration and home remodeling. When you have an unexpected home issue at the most improbable time, Tailored has an emergency response number with trained professionals available to help you anytime, day or night. Tailored Restoration has locations to serve you in Anchorage, Eagle River, Matsu, or Fairbanks. Give them a call at 907-344-1239 or make an appointment today at tailoredrestorationalaska.com.
Total Truck, Alaska's premier supplier for custom automotive accessories and overlander products. If you want to customize your vehicle, talk to the team at Total Truck, where you'll find their expertise along with top brands such as AIRE, RSI Smart Caps, Goose Gear, iCamper, Frontrunner, Rigid Lights, Rhino Lining bed liners, and everything you need to outfit your truck or SUV. Want to turn your truck into a sleeping option? They have rooftop tents, custom camping equipment, electronics, and solar energy packages to keep you powered up deep in the backcountry. Stop by their store location on Dowling between the new and old Seward Highway, or check them out at TotalTruckAK.com.
All right, we're back. You ready for the trivia music?
We can do some trivia. I think we
Okay,
should wait for
him
Tenge.
to come
Yeah,
back.
we want to hear a little bit about this creature craft, though. You want to talk about the creature craft before Tenge gets
Yeah,
here?
it's a pretty unique boat. Yeah.
We got a picture of it somewhere on your Facebook?
There definitely, Reed's got his video.
This is the one you're telling me about before.
Yeah, I do not tend
creature
to. I
craft.
don't tend to put much press into that because I don't want somebody to get a tool like that and beach ball it, because it's a very specific use tool, and you know, like all tools, there's a right way to use them and a really reckless way to use them.
Whoa.
Dude, that looks so cool.
This thing is rad.
So this particular creature craft is what we call the aguamala, which means bad water.
Okay, for people that are just listening, this is basically a raft that has like a rainbow, like another raft on top. How would you describe
It's
this?
a roll.
cage.
It's basically a
Like a
roll
roll
cage.
cage.
A
It's
roll
roll cage
cage.
on top.
Okay.
And it self-rights then, right?
That's correct. That's correct. Not completely by itself. It's certain things. So training is involved. But basically, you know, in this video, we're sitting in a tandem row forward thing. So one rower. And this is on the 6 Mile at somewhat low water. Matter of fact, most of the commercial guys actually got stuffed or dumped their boats and their clients this day because it was
Look at all those
actually so
people.
narrow.
Oh.
But all the people, this was a friend of mine, Timmy, puts on a nice festival down there on the 6 Mile.
What's that called?
And I think it's pretty much the 6 Mile Fest, and he'll have music at night and, you know, all kinds of things. And there'll be kayak races and, you know, all sorts of things going on. But seldom is it sunny, so this was just a great video opportunity. This is, you know, if when you're trained right and you're running technically, good lines, like putting this boat, sticking it exactly where you want it.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly capable boat, and it tends to make 6 Mile, which is kind of Alaska's classic whitewater run. It tends to make it like we're just kind of casually talking our way down like we are now.
Yeah.
And now, obviously you run any tool wrong and it's a completely different scenario.
Yeah.
And let's say, for example, we were putting that on its edge sideways. Now you're just drifting. You're not boating anymore. You're not in control anymore. The idea of this is you're actually buckled to this boat.
Oh, you are?
You are buckled in.
About that.
And the reason being is if this boat has a lot of speed and momentum, and also if you are getting washing machined or typewritered or all the typical gnarly things that could happen in whitewater, you'd get ejected out of the boat. You wouldn't be able to stay in it.
Yeah,
just the same if you got in an auto accident and went through the front windshield without a seatbelt. So.
And there's people everywhere. I noticed you brought the good oars, the ones with the chunks out of them for this.
So that's interesting. This creature craft has a history of the video that you showed of doing overhead dams with multiple creature crafts. So this one's been in a few sword fights.
Nice.
And so multiple boats stacked in windmilling oars.
It seems like it's hard to see. Because you got that
It can be. You're right. But when you're using certain ferry angles, then you all have a pretty good outlook.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're using this in a tandem row forward or rig setup. You can also put paddlers on seats on the side of this.
Oh.
And so those seats are strapped down just like frame. And you are buckled to those seats. And what's cool about the creature craft, so there's a little history here. So back in the day, I was working with what I called my dog bone boats. And it was with a boat very similar to the one you have, Jack, the D series and the E series, and it was basically 2 dog bones sticking up. And if you kind of notice, this
they
has
tied
that.
together.
Yeah, totally.
But mine needed to go into airplanes.
Oh, okay.
So I was tying mine into the boat in the frame, not permanently. And the other thing, so I had it in more components. You could take it on and off, like a windy day and it's not whitewater, take it off, pack it up. And so in other words, this doesn't pack well compared to the, being able to take the components apart. That said, I never would have thought about the seat belting. And the seat belts are not conventional like you would use in your car or an airplane. They're actually they're a commercial grade Velcro belt that's got quite an apron on it. And I never would have thought of that either. That was absolutely
because you can
ingenious.
rip it off and
totally. Get
Absolutely. And so you can hang upside down with all your weight. You can, do whatever weighting and unweighting you want to do, and you are on that. You are Velcro fly in that boat, and so that is absolutely ingenious. And when I was talking to the creature craft guy, his name is Darren. Really awesome guy. Been there, done it.
Yeah.
Knows his stuff. And doesn't have to tell you how he knows his stuff. Just a really, really good guy.
Yeah.
And put same kind of thing. He would never put anything on his back that he wouldn't put on the other. He and I get along really, really well. And so anyway, at first these boats came out with just a triangle on the top. The problem is if you got in a big hole upside down, the triangle would have no buoyancy and you could actually sink down and drown. So even though you had sort of a roll cage, it wasn't good enough. So then they put 2 big balls on the side.
Right, yeah, the dog
and
bone.
those went for a while. But they also had just single continuous tubes on the bottom. They didn't have this big pillow in the front and the back.
Oh, okay.
So this was what they called a Gen 4. So if it's on its edge in a Gen 4, it doesn't have the surface tension to grab, and it can self-right easier.
Okay, cool.
And
that's because of the 2 little dog bone parts?
Yes, so the
Second off the-
superstructure helps it from completely turning over, but if it did, you wouldn't sink down so far.
Okay.
And then the dog bones sort of at the tube level keep it from sucking down and sticking to the water.
Okay.
And so really that's kind of the latest of designs that have really stuck to go mild to wild anywhere in the world. Waterfalls, low head dams, and it's interesting. So Darren and I were talking, and he really wanted to have a power application because most low head dams in America are not in mountains. They're in Ohio.
Right.
You know, or something like that.
Yeah.
So you can't always save somebody in a Lowhead Dam. A lot of accidents and deaths happen when people are standing right there and can't do anything about it. So these had an incredible rescue application.
Yeah, sure.
But at the time, Darren only had a way to descend over and get somebody.
But not to that
So,
point.
you know, we had talked about power applications. Well, it so happens that power applications for catarafts started here in Alaska.
Oh, really?
And it was the very first catarafts that were power catarafts were very challenging because you had a wake going to the outside of the tubes, but you had an intersecting wake going to the inside.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And that intersecting wake would interrupt right at the engine. So you had basically two
cavitate.
laterals coming into the engine. You had ventilation, cavitation, and the faster you wanted to go, you got diminishing returns because that inner wake would finally swamp the entire cowling and the engine be underwater.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was all kinds of skirting and things like that tried, and your hull speed was what it was. It's still a raft, and but I said, he wanted to put this power application, and he had already done that. But he was dealing with that intersecting wake, and he didn't know what to do about it. And I said, well, certain skirting. Well, all this drop stitch paddleboard technology started really coming out at the time. And so he was thinking, do we put a hard bottom on this? Do we put an aluminum jet boat bottom on it? What are we going to do here? Because every time he'd put power and more power to try to ascend some of these streams to get to these that would pill up. And then the whole floor would come up. And so I took an inexpensive boat that I had designed for a company, and I tore the floor out of it, just as if I stuck a paddleboard floor underneath it, and it worked. And I told him, you might try this. And so over time and over the years, he's perfected that. And what's cool now is they have a full-on fire team rescue boat that you put these engines on, and they work not quite like a jet. They're still a prop, but they're a pump jet, so they have a covering completely around them. Most of the military guys use these things.
I've seen those,
and pretty much only military has a lot of access to certain motors of that variety. But but anyway, so he's now putting different floors on there and sealing them up. And what's cool is now you got that lower center of gravity and that weight of that floor. So now it really does self-right. You don't have to be as active as possible, and you stay drier, safer.
Right. Sure.
Right.
So this one is one of the first gens of the Gen 4s, and then all that orange stuff you see on there, that's all urethane coating. So that's on top of the tubes, and I do that on any raft.
For extra protection.
Yep. So that's kind of like putting a real good custom bed liner, not the as seen on TV or Walmart variety. So the prep's in there, all the coating's in there, and it's a commercial grade, like a mil spec mixture that you're doing in there, and that encapsulates that boat fabrication. So if you're in wall hits or any of those things, it's incredibly tough stuff.
Nice.
Really tough. And now they're doing a full sprayed on encapsulation. Back then, you just sort of armored what you thought you might get.
Right.
Oh, that's cool.
And they're doing it at the factory?
So, and this is in Colorado. And when we say factory, this is a guy's really nice workshop at home.
Really?
And most rafts, actually, in this country are kind of made like that.
Cool.
These companies that you think are just massive things, they're not. They're not. They're just a bunch of dedicated guys getting it done.
Yeah.
So now the full encapsulation, what that does is the curing process is happening to this two-part urethane. So it's a sort of an epoxy-like scenario. It's getting stronger with a two-part, and the more you lay it on, it's actually like, if we put this can in a freezer, the can expands. Water's going to expand. It turns into ice. Well, as the urethane does that, it shrinks. So on any plastic boat, including the one you had, let's just say that we wanted to urethane coat your boat and fully encapsulate it, with very little PSI, it would be hard as a rock because it shrinks on itself. And so it's pretty. Plastics are cool.
Does that make the surface tension less? Because I know a lot of people are doing skins on jet boats, and then remember they had that stuff like Never Wet and all these cool Aquapel stuff for your windshield, but they use some of that coating on some of these boats where water just beads right off.
Urethane is slicker. It's a slick plastic compared to any kind of just rubber surface or PVC. So there's definitely some, and it wouldn't matter if it was orange peeled or glassy. It would provide that slickness. But
that's so
they're very fun boats, and a lot of people think, oh, you just don't know what you're doing, and you don't have to care, and you just go down. The funny thing is, this is so precise that you become a much better boater because you really feel it.
It looks narrow too. It looks like
it's very
you could
narrow.
maneuver very well. Like I saw you oaring and kind of lining up, and I see you got, well, those are throws, but like, just like the weight of it. It just
Yeah, the
seems very
frame's a little
centered.
different too there.
Yes, this frame is not a component frame for a reason, because of getting big time washing machine in those big waterfalls and low head dams that you see, and so this frame is actually even trussed, so you can see it's not just even a right angle. There's a truss welded. So very, very cool frame. This unfortunately that frame guy is no longer in business, but his technology and his designs carry on to this day. And our new one is actually coming for super steep technical rivers.
Really?
And it's actually a G2, so it's going to look like this, except without the big pillows in the front.
Okay.
So I'm going to get through narrower stretches than I've ever gotten before.
So you're going down the copper with two nets.
And this is really small. It's really small. Enough, you need isolation from the water. Believe me, when you've got a paddler sitting on the side and you're on your edge, they're not happy. They're in the water. And and if you've ever been in the water but under foam, it's really weird. It's really weird because you can watch the green foam or the blue foam or the tannic looking, the root beery looking stuff going on, and you can actually still breathe. But it's not pretty. You're like, get me out of here. Get me in here. You're like, I'm going to do the world's best chin up, and I'm still not out of here until these other guys on the opposite end are cooperating. And so this gives you the optimum isolation from the water. If you get it too small, it's actually not that much of a benefit.
Okay. What's up with the rower in the front? I would have thought that you'd have like better angles with the because it looks like with the rowing frame, those are pin-in clips, but the pin-in clips are in the front. Wouldn't you want that in the back to have like better leverage and
just the
direction?
Opposite? Just the opposite. So if you had a rower towards the back, towards that stern, what you'd need is paddle power up front. And you're going to play a little bit more of an aggressive game with power in the front and lining it up in the back. So the guy in the back is really just setting the angle and powering, similar to a paddle raft. Is that guy's going to set the angle and then tell everybody what to do.
Right.
So you play a little bit more of an offensive game.
Yeah, okay.
Is that kind of like when you're in like a kayak or a pack raft, and I've noticed like as soon as you stop paddling, they spin around and like the weight where they're sitting goes down river, and they just
you want to go down a river a little bit canted forward. And also when you're playing defense, then if you get into a ferry angle, the back end's lighter, so you can pivot, change, and get more efficiency. It wants to, because the river's going down. So if you pull against it defensively, you want the back to be up a little bit to plane and pivot and transition and turn. And so you definitely don't want to be the low rider cruising down the river. And that's also why in a lot of rivers up here, you don't want to put that big bun of gear on the back and a bunch of people in the front, because if you get to a shallow and you got to step out, you're actually now drafting more water. And so, and of course higher center of gravity and things
and
like
you're
that.
also taking on more water.
But this gives you a ton of leverage, and when you're running big water and big holes and big drops, the advantage there is you get that leverage of what you can get your tips through, you're probably going to get your tail through. So it's sort of like skiing and skating, right? If you can get the toes and or the tips of your skis through some tree line, the chances are you're not straddling it, right? And the other thing is that by being here, if I've got a big hydraulic or a big drop that's trying to suck me back, I'm at least a lot more real estate forward of it. And
I've seen that on rivers. We had a buddy get swamped like that. Like he turned a little bit sideways and it just sucked him back. And one of the guys on the kayak, it was Wolf, he was like pushing his body forward, and it was sucking him back. He was surfing forward in the gold can of hydraulic. It was hilarious.
Oh, and that last little
but he did escape. He was like almost to the nose of it, and he finally surfed out of the
Well,
thing.
that's what boats will do. And the longer and skinnier and lighter they are, they will back up into it, go sideways, and flip.
Yeah, that's how our buddies did it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It like turned at the last and filled up, brought him back.
For people that want to watch this video, highly recommend it. I mean, what a beautiful day you guys chose too.
Yeah.
It's called 6 Mile Whitewater Creature Craft.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
fun.
it's on Reed Leslie's channel.
That is
So-
a great video.
So ferry angle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like define that and how to set it up and all that kind of thing. 'Cause
Sure. So there's a couple, river physics, just basics, right? So gravity, just like if I had a snowball sitting at the top of a perfect hill and I drop that snowball, he wants to go straight down the fall line. So a river, of course, is trying to do that in its life. It's trying to get to the sea straighter and straighter and straighter. Or if
Totally.
it flattens out, it might have to make more turns. But I mean, the idea is gravity goes downhill.
Totally.
And then the high-speed water tends to be on the outside of a turn.
Right.
Okay.
So what's going on there is you've got two force vectors, one going straight, and let's just say this is my, outside of the turn, the cut bank. I've got this high-speed water going this way. So if I can put my boat, hand me that remote actually. I'll try not to mess it up.
Directly perpendicular.
So if I've got this high-speed water coming around here and I've got gravity coming down there, what I want to do is I want to get to a 45 or 90 this direction. So here's the bow of my boat.
Yeah.
And I want to pull back. And what I'm going to grab is basically a wedge of water here that's working with the river. And I'm going to be able to keep, if I did this, for example, this is going to make more sense. If I did this, for example, what's going to happen now, I got the gravity, and I got the high speed, and I'm going to end up on this bank very, very fast.
Yeah.
But if I have this angle, and this, we're talking about oar-rigged rafts.
Right. Totally.
So if I'm coming around this way and I'm maintaining that angle, now sometimes it might be closer to 90.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of more yarding it across a little bit.
I've been there. Yeah.
And so the beauty of that ferry angle and that wedge, you're working with the river, and you're kind of looking ahead, and you're slowing the boat in relation to those force vectors. And so that's kind of the way you negotiate turns. But it's also the way you're going to negotiate if I have a stone in the middle of the river and I decide, well, I want to go right or left of that. If I want to go this way, I don't want to start paddling hard this way because I might end up on that rock.
Yeah.
Right.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that defensive angle. I'm going to pull. I'm not going to overly pull to end over here, but I'm going to pull to some avoidance and defense here. And you always look at the big stuff, don't sweat the small stuff. So if there's a big rock that could do you harm, you're paying attention to that. If there's a small rock and it's kind of like, it's there, but it's not really going to do me any harm, real estate on the boat, whatsoever, don't worry about it too much. Even if you stick to it a little bit or it bounces you around, but always pay attention to the big stuff. That's the stuff that can pin you, that can do you harm, or the boat harm.
Yeah.
But, if I'm wanting to go this way, then I'm probably going to, cock it the other way.
Yeah.
So I'm always, and if you go down to the Russian River ferry, where it's actually tagged there, that's all they're doing. They're never running any power. They're
That's what
working with the river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I asked the question that I thought ferry angle. I'm like, where's that? And I'm like,
Yep, the Riverman.
There it is.
The Riverman ferry.
I was
Absolutely.
thinking the Yukon, right? Like Dawson City and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, they just throw the ropes and just right across.
Well, and you see how, like, stern wheelers back in the day used to get across the river. They didn't just like turn at 90 and head to the town. They had to do the same sorts of things. And so that's one way. If you're in really, really, really pushy water, sometimes you're going to have to look, and you got a big load. Sometimes you're actually going to use a downstream ferry. And when you're running an oar rig with oars, your power is this way. It's not this way. This is a maintenance thing. And you could play a little offense, but not compared to putting your back and your feet and your everything into it. So what you might do, let's say that you got some serious thing down here and you've well in advance, you could actually cock it the other way and pull and outspeed the river. But you got a lot more outspeeding potential this way early on than you do if you were trying to do it
Late in the game.
late and forward.
Yeah.
So downstream ferry angles on a big river, like an 18-foot boat on the Colorado River at high water, and you got a certain thing that you've got to get to. Sometimes, an early downstream ferry is really going to beat that, tugging and tugging and tugging and getting tired.
Yeah, I was kind of curious because I noticed, as we do the Gold Canyon for all these years, and people have done the raft trip tons of times, and other people and other rafts, and that seems to be the hardest thing for people to grasp is, hey, turn this way, pull this way. It's easier on the boat.
It's very
It's the transition between the two outside bends.
Right.
It's
And
like,
then,
hey, pull away from danger. You want to be 45 degrees to that outside, to that. You want to be pointed upstream 45 degrees away from the outside bend.
Right.
And you're finishing that turn.
And once you're finished, transition.
You need to do a transition early to the next one. And that is where everyone gets fucked up.
Yes.
And that's totally something that like people they're pushing forward and they're just literally just tiring themselves out, and I'm like, guys, no, you gotta go back. Like,
well, and if you don't get enough angle, you're actually stalling in the current.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, totally.
So you're not, the river's not quite making progress, but it will eventually when you get tired.
Yeah.
But you're just sort of stalling the inevitable.
Yep.
And this is not working. This is not working. No, put a little more angle, and maybe
Totally.
But no, that's a good point. And the other thing is, a lot of people give up the ferry angle. They don't believe in it. They're like, this is not working good enough, and then they do just the opposite.
They're not patient enough.
And a lot of boating is patience. Absolutely, feel and patience. And so if you don't believe in your ferry angle, if you just say, I'm going to throw that garbage out, the next thing you know, you are accelerating into the problem.
More to your point about the big rocks and the small rocks, this year was a high year, and I was riding on a raft with a guy that's only done it once, and he's doing a great job, and he's over paddling for these big rocks and then ending up in other rocks, you know what I mean, instead of just letting it ride and then little corrections when you have the deep water. And so in October we're doing the Grand Canyon in dories. And more to your point, you were talking about that huge wall of water, and I saw this picture of this dory just like straight up. I'm going, that's going to be me. I'm like, do I bring an extra strap to hold on? Do I get the Velcro deal, like 5-inch wide Velcro?
Now, interestingly, in a dory, like a kayak, you can play more offense.
Okay.
And in a cataract, you can play more offense. In this, in that creature craft, I can play a lot of offense.
Okay. And you can just power right over.
Well, it's not powering; it's working with the river in an offensive strategy.
Okay.
And you'll see paddle rafters do that too. So the guide will set an angle on a certain part of the river, and the river is never level. If you really look at it carefully,
never.
It's never level, and that's for several reasons. But the biggest one is that it's a laminar relationship. Every layer has a different speed.
Totally.
And so that's one thing. The other thing is there's going to be high points and low points. And so the eddy lines, some might be high, some might be low. But let's say you're going around a turn and you're playing the aggressive game. What's going to happen is they're going to kind of take this angle around. He's going to set that angle, but he's going to have a lot of power. But he's also going to have a little bit of a hillside in the river that he's working with. And if you can discover that hillside playing the defense, it'll be all easier.
Yeah.
And a good way to practice then the downstream ferry is what I call breaking the seal. If you've ever come around a big bend that almost comes all the way back around and it's pilling up against the wall, if you just throw that 45 and 90, you're going to, it's still going to work, but you're going to be pulling and pulling and pulling, and the boat's going to go slower and slower and slower. And you're just going to be working harder and going slower is what it boils down to. And it still might work. But what you actually want to do, if I'm coming around a big hook like that, I might turn that butt. I'm not going to lose the butt of the boat. I'm not going to lose the ass end of it, but I'm going to turn it downstream just a little bit. And it's going to break that funny seal of that eddy line.
Yeah.
And you're going to accelerate backwards. You're going to feel it right away because you're going to go from that ferry defense, and then you're going to, once it really starts to hook around that cut bank, you're going to break that seal, pull back, and you'll be like,
yep.
And you really feel it.
It was very high this year, and there was a spot where that would have been very useful because came through, it was shallow, and I could only go pretty much 2 places. And I went in and I did my ferry angle, and then I was like, okay, maybe a little 90. And normally we're going 2-3 miles an hour on the Gold Canyon. We're going 5.5 miles an hour with our GPS.
High water means everything.
Ripping.
Yeah.
And I went in, and it's like, hey, put the poles away. Here you go. We're going to hit the bank. We're going to hit this tree. And we didn't. I mean, it wasn't hard. You know, it was a planned attack, but still, I mean.
Is that where the log jam was in the middle?
No, it was like a shelf, like he's saying, where you can see the river just pan down to the left, and then there was like a big cut bank. And so I went in a little too steep. I probably should have came up early, but it was hard to get over there, and people were fishing and stuff, so I was trying to keep them close to the nice holes. But I went in, and then like as soon as you drop down, it was like, you know, go, and then it just kept going around.
Yeah.
And that probably would have worked to break that tension of that, because it kind of sucked me back and sucked me into shore, which is where the tree was, which wasn't like a huge sweeper. It was just a little tree.
But yeah, that's why I call it. I mean, I don't know of too many people that call it that, but breaking the seal is the best way I can explain the feel.
Makes sense.
Because you're like I'm sucking. I'm not sucking. It's like there's suction. You're feeling it, and you're going towards, and then it's going to hook. So when in doubt, you're still better off to play defense. But at a certain time, you're like, am I just going to go slow as heck around this? I'm doing everything, and I've got the angle I want.
Yeah.
But if I just cocked it downstream with my power stroke at the right time, and timing's everything too, you know?
Yeah, totally.
But if I did that and just gave it one pull, you just feel that... You just feel that acceleration and easy backwards. Now, you might have to go back into your ferry angle, too.
Right.
Because you haven't lost your butt. You haven't just let it, whatever.
Yeah, I didn't lose the butt.
Full
But
360.
I was definitely sucking wind because I was like on the tippy toes just getting it.
And that's it's probably the classic case of what you said. I mean, it's you're defensive. You're not letting the real estate of the boat get in trouble.
Yeah.
But you're working so hard in a deceleration defensive setup that you know, once you break that seal and play that tiny offense at the same, you're getting more out of it. It's pretty cool, actually.
And it wasn't very wide. It was like 5 feet wide. So, you know, I mean, the boat's 14, 15 feet. So, like, you didn't have a lot to play with.
But when in doubt, and a lot of people give up. A lot of people just kind of like, enough of this, I'm giving up. And let's say you're going around a turn that has a sweeper or a strainer or a combination sweeper, strainer, log jam, but you do have a clean path if you keep working. The worst case scenario is you catch the bow and it spins around and you're not in there. But if you didn't keep working, then half your boat's there. And if you gave up, all of your boats in there. So just making that little real estate gain can mean everything.
Yeah, I've seen some people give up, that's for sure.
Yeah. and you see it going through holes too, like, oh, well, I'm in it. No, keep doing something.
Yeah.
You know, it might not be the right thing, but keep doing something, because chances are if you're doing something, you might adjust to the right thing.
By accident.
Or a better place.
Okay. All right.
Trivia time.
Ooh. Dude, I like this.
All right, guys. So the first question is, what is the longest river rafting expedition ever completed?
Mile-wise?
Mile-wise. You get bonus points to be like, where is it and who did it?
I have an idea, but I'll let others go.
No. You go ahead and go first.
Go for it, bud.
Does it matter if it's like the same?
No,
okay.
go.
Okay. So there's a guy from Minnesota that took a kayak and hiked up Chilkoot Pass, and he went like the Koyukuk, Yukon, like hiked through the woods, did all this, came out, popped out of like Nome, went all the way down through the ocean, never ocean kayaked a day in his life or whatever, and he goes through, comes around, and he said the hardest part was Cook Inlet, and he almost biffed it twice, and Cook Inlet came out and came right across like Westchester. 5 months.
Damn.
5,000 miles in 5
5,000
months. Took him like a year to plan it. He went up Chilkoot, and they said, don't go. So then he went back up when they said it was good, hiked his raft, then came back down and hiked his food up. And he had food stations the whole way. He did 5,000 miles in 5 months.
That was way beyond what I was thinking.
That sounds awesome.
I think I heard about that. I can't remember if it was a raft or canoe, but I mean, it was like...
It was a specialized... I want to say it was
it
a
two
kayak
brothers?
or canoe.
Was it
it was a guy. I think it was one guy from Minnesota, but it was on Outdoor Explorer.
Nice.
I don't know how long ago, years ago. Anyways, that's my guess.
That sounds pretty good.
I was going to say 1,000 miles.
All right.
And I was going to say the Yukon.
Okay.
Okay.
That was my guess.
Well, the Yukon's what, like 1,880 something miles, like
No,
almost
it's
2,000
long.
miles.
It's absolutely
Starts
long.
in Canada, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Okay, Brian. What do
All
you
right,
think?
Brian. World's longest river rafting expedition. This is like the world record book one.
Yeah.
So this doesn't have anything that wasn't.
There's a couple of rivers, that are, that are over in Asia that, like the Yangtze and the Yellow and some of those that, come to mind just because they start up so high that you'd be like getting altitude sickness to start. And if you completed it, and survived it, it's, I would have to say some of those. But I guess it's hard if you're talking source waters, to the sea type of things. I mean, you could certainly start in, some of the Grand Canyon of the Amazon in Peru, and then on down the Amazon. If you
That's what I was thinking.
some of those are incredibly long too. But I would have to say that if you jumped in a raft. Is that what we're talking? In a raft, and it doesn't have to be a conventional raft. It could be just some weird thing, even like even creature craft sort of thing.
Creature craft, the Amazon.
Like a Russian rendition of. I would have to say some of those that are crossing that, because those are some of the oldest rivers in the world, and they just. I would say just length and volume, and if you could put the whole trip together. You might not be able to afford to start and stop somewhere in between. You might have to finally finish. And so I would have to say like the Yangtze or the Yellow and some of that. But I don't know if the Nile's long enough. But if you started out again, in one tributary of the Nile and then just kept going, I suppose those are possible too. But I think your guess for North America, any kind of like Mackenzie or Yukon drainage sorts of things would be. I suppose you could start out in some other places and call Mississippi tributaries and go on. So if you just jumped on a river called this from start to finish, I think the Yukon's a really good example of that. But I'm still probably going to say that it would be like the Yangtze or.
Okay.
All right. So in 2012, Tehran Kumar Banjari performed the river rafting for 2,525 kilometers. So I got to do the math there. In 56 days. Wow. Rafting the river Ganga, which was, I think it's Ganja, was done from the nearest point of its source to the estuary, to the ocean.
Wow.
Yeah, so what is that? Kilometers? 25.
That's crazy. That's a long way. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's a long way.
And some of those, some of those rivers, like he was saying, like, it's not just the water. It's like what's attacking you in the water,
Yeah.
Well, there were years. This was years ago when I first got involved with AIRE rafts, actually, and I tried to put an Alaska team together to go to the World Championships, which were on the Zambezi.
Oh wow!
And there was actually the death waiver had nothing to do with the whitewater. It had to do with hippos and crocs.
Right.
In the calm water.
Right.
Dude, those hippos are madness.
And I told AIRE, I said, I can't promise you'd get a boat back.
Yeah.
And I said, there's so many things that could happen. I don't know if it's on this border of this country or this border of this country where the raft could end up.
Yeah.
Logistically.
Yeah.
And then if a hippo eats the boat, I'm not bringing it back. So anyway, we never were, because I really wanted to have an American and an Alaskan team with an American-made boat.
Awesome.
And it never worked out. They were like, no, if you can't bring our boat back, sorry, Charlie.
I saw an awesome kayak movie like 15 years ago from that river, and they make it through all the crazy rapids. They're in like a really nice stretch, and then there's two paddlers. The second paddler just disappears, and a croc got him.
Oh my God.
And it's a really good documentary. I'll have to look up what the name was. It's awesome.
So the ganja, where does this start?
I think it's in India.
Wow.
I would guess so. I mean,
there's such opportunistic feeders in those kind of rivers. Like, I remember watching that River Monsters guy, and there was a fish.
He's cool.
He had the giant teeth with the fish, and he catches the fish, and there's another of that same species fish inside. And it's choking. He pulls it out and pulls like has half-eaten fish and drops it, and then lets the fish go. He's like very nice about that. But they'll eat anything. Was my point. Like alligators, they're just eating whoever, right?
But the ganja must start up in the Himalaya.
Yeah, it does.
It's got to.
Yeah,
It's
it does.
got to,
And then
yeah.
it goes to India.
I'll be damned.
All right,
Yeah.
great question.
Yep.
That's
so
cool.
it's 1,569
I
miles.
was
And
gonna
I'll
say,
look up
how-
that cool story you told. I'm sure that exists too, but that it probably
Yeah.
didn't, since it wasn't like a
That's a
single
kayaker,
trip.
though.
It
He
didn't.
raft. He kayaked.
Well, and
so.
this is like a single river run.
Oh,
it
okay.
wasn't like multiple river
Yeah,
runs.
he
That
hiked from
story, that
the
sounds
kayak
awesome, though.
up to something else, and like
Sounds amazing.
When you
it
think
was.
about those logistics too, it's what do those people believe in the river? Are you even supposed to really be out there
Right.
floating? Is it, it's a gift from above that you shouldn't be in there.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? More to your point, he's telling a story on Outdoor Explorer about this thing, and he said he's in the ocean and he can't even see the waves. He could hear them crash, and that's how he knew how to where to paddle and what. So he was experienced enough to know what a crashing wave was and this and that. But
Just
he's out
go
in the
that way.
ocean, like Nome, all the way cruising around Alaska, and
That's
he just
cool. That's
heard it.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, I'll try and find that name in the thing.
Jackie, another one?
All right. Okay. What is the longest continuous raft trip in Alaska? And how many miles?
Man. In Alaska.
Yep.
I mean, I'd have to say the Yukon just because it just goes straight from outside Alaska all the way through and then dumps out on the other side of the state. It's almost a mile wide in some
Yeah,
places.
that's a good one.
It's-
That's
I
a good
mean,
answer. I'm going to go with the same answer, actually. I don't know what.
I don't
can't
know
think
any
of
other
something
bigger
else.
rivers than that, right? Like,
So I guess we're qualifying this a little bit that it starts in Alaska. So somebody's not starting this raft trip in Canada somewhere.
right.
They're
But if they dump in where the border, I'm just looking at the state over here on this map, and I'm going, okay, it's off to the side. It's in this huge lake, and they have the train thing that goes to it. And all that.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like you go all the way around it, and then you dump out.
I'm
there.
going to go with the Cusco.
The Cusco.
Yeah.
Cusco.
Two Yukons and a Cusco. What is it, Jack?
It's the Yukon.
Yeah.
I figure, yeah,
1,400 miles.
So 1,400 miles, and
that's a lot.
I'm just trying to think where you would actually put in Alaska for that.
I know. I'm looking at the map.
So
going,
if
it's a
you
lot
if you
of
looked at the
mountains.
map and just the border from one to the other, I get that.
Right.
But where would you put in?
Man,
And so a raft trip has to put in somewhere
Right.
and come out somewhere.
I mean, listening to some of the-
Theoretically.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be an interesting toss up there because most people that are going to float the Yukon, are going to put in maybe at let's say Eagle. That's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
that's
Eagle,
kind of
yeah.
a common
Yeah.
location. But if you were also saying, well, I'm on a Yukon adventure, you're probably going to be up towards Whitehorse or something
Yeah.
and entering. So I guess you could say if you. It's not. You could start the trip in Whitehorse and then say I paddled from this point in Alaska to the
yeah.
other.
Yeah.
So but both of those would be pretty close.
A lot of
Very
people put
close.
in Dawson actually, so they drive up. My buddy's parents every year
Yeah.
would go do a canoe trip or a raft trip now because they're older and they just don't want to have the chance.
So the Kuskokwim's 702 miles.
And what was the Yukon?
1,400 within Alaska.
I think
Within Alaska.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's
double.
1,982 miles. I want to say total.
It
Don't
is.
quote. Is
Yeah.
it? Okay.
That's
Wow.
cool.
It's the last time I looked it up. See,
That's a
hey,
good fact.
Wow.
better
look
with
at
every
you.
sip, baby. Better with every sip.
Good fact.
And I was really tempted to agree with you, but then I was like, where would I put in for that?
Yeah,
I was
totally.
kind of
Yeah.
overthinking it.
And the guy that did it, the Minnesota guy, he ended up, I think, going to the Kuskokwim and the Koyukuk or one of those two, and then dumping out into, I want to say Nome or Bethel, like it dumps out right there. I forget which one's which, but one of them dumps out right there. So he ended up hiking from one to the other, and it was where the steamboats with the Christian missions used to go up back in the day, and they'd go up the one, and then some people would hike to the other. Anyways,
Yeah.
old
more,
school
Jackie?
stuff.
Yeah, we got one more.
Cool. That's
Some Sidney Lawrence stuff. Shadows
All
of the
right.
Koyukuk.
All right. When was the first river raft made? And this isn't from wood, so I guess it would be like true prototype of what would become a river raft.
and for river, not like a lifeboat or something like that.
I have an idea, but I've been studying.
1949.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I guess it could be for a lifeboat too.
1949 is my guess.
49.
It's a first like raft that was made for like multiple water.
Yeah, because it's kind of funny when you look at inflatable history and you look at the sinking of the Titanic, and basically at about that time they had come out with pneumatic boats, but none were on that boat.
Yeah.
And you just go,
Yeah.
with all that new technology.
Where was those rubber
cruising.
beautiful rafts at that
Right.
point? Right.
You're like, oh my
Non-punctured.
goodness.
I see that.
And but most of the rafts that we consider double ender rafts, most of those were kind of coming out. They were surplus boats. They were basically for the ocean and cut in half.
Yeah.
And then put back together. and they were put back together for the western big rivers is what they were, so you're basically looking at multiple people pretty much in the 50s trying this kind of stuff. And but that doesn't necessarily say who is the first,
Right.
because I think that's highly debatable.
I got a date, but just because I've been looking at the Grand Canyon stuff and some other
Hit
stuff.
us with a
That's
date.
the reasoning is
Totally.
the big
it's a
western
canyon.
rivers.
I'm gonna go with 1952, and that's just a number that stuck in my head from some arbitrary thing I probably watched.
Okay.
Probably not even right.
Good. Brian?
No, I'm right with you on that, because there are some
Just
people
put the middle
that,
and go 51.
Yeah, there you
sure.
Because it was like during the Dories and the other stuff, and I remember watching some video.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just stuck in my head.
All right.
And there's an Alaskan actually that was part of that whole thing. His last name is a very famous, adventuring name here, Griffin. And I mean, but again, the early days of what do you do with this thing? Will it hold up? Does anybody believe in it?
Yeah.
Are there
Yeah.
any available? And then you start to see, people saying, "Hey, maybe this will work."
Yeah.
And so what's an experimental double ender and surplus, and what's a real one that's like, this is the first manufactured raft, this is acceptable, this is going to do it.
Yeah.
And actually there's a lot of difference in time there. There's easily 10, 15 more years.
Yeah.
And no one's gonna save me, so I better make sure it's good.
All right. So the discovery of vulcanized rubber was Charles Goodyear from the Tire Guys at 1838. So this other dude, Thomas Hancock, 10 years later, started using that rubber to make inflatable boats.
So
that they use
48?
for different things. It
1848?
doesn't say they ran rivers. Yeah, 1841.
Yeah, as inflatables. Yeah, that's
100
true. And
years
Goodyear
before my
Goodyear
guess.
got none of the credit, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting is like so that but his
That's
was like,
impressive.
will this float and what's it for?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I wouldn't qualify that as
Like a
I
river
mean, it's
raft.
valid history for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, totally.
And then Goodyear worked his ass off forever. And still, even though the namesake of like Goodyear tires and blimps and all this kind of stuff,
yeah.
he basically died never getting credit for anything. It's like, we'll take his name.
That's crazy.
And, so yeah, it really
We got a
is.
blimp named after you.
Someone else stole his technology for inflatables.
Yeah.
You have a blimp that didn't blow up, and so you're doing good.
But as far as like Western, double enders that are actually built for the rivers, hey, somebody said, let's take what we have and make a river runner.
Yeah, I wonder when that
your
would be.
timeline is really good, and then it would just be debatable who decided to cut what in half and why.
Yeah.
And so the first guy, for example, was saying, well, let's try this, and then eventually a commercial guy said, let's make 10 of them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's why the history is
Like
pretty
you were
debatable.
talking about skiing a lot, like when me and him were working at Hilltop and Liska, and then we're doing all the,
Borderline stuff.
we're borderline, but we were building the half pipes and stuff, and they came out with those double-ended skis, and it was like the first double-ender, so you didn't have to land backwards on a 180 on a skis or a 5 or whatever. And so when you land backwards, you could actually run out instead of just like tip forward and try not to eat it. And mess up the half pipe and get yelled at by
Snowboarding
snowboarders.
definitely changed the ski game.
Yeah, totally. And it was like double-ended skis. Like
You should definitely look up the
mind-blown.
name Griffith, and
I will, yeah.
because his son, I want to say, is up there age-wise.
Yeah.
And the guy just like won his age group on that Alyeska climb or whatever they just had. But incredibly talented outdoor adventure family. But he's got some cool old pictures of him. He walked from like Alaska to Greenland or something like
what?
that. Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, in segments, but still,
Right.
you know, like
Dude, some of
wow,
those-
you know, hot
so-
tent, yes,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
When we're in Dawson, you'll get some of these old timers talking, and they're like, "Yeah, we walked 1,000 miles," and I'm like, "What did you bring?" And they're like, "A stick of butter, some other. I mean, like nothing, just fat, just to eat." And they just slice it off, keep going. I'm like, for 1,000 miles in the cold? They're like, "Yeah."
Well, and they
Unbelievable.
started a lot of that adventure racing. And so when you start looking at the adventure racing and you go, who started finally winning this and why? That's when pack rafts started.
Yeah.
So were pack rafts? Yes, I guess they were pack rafts. But, you know, were they what we are seeing today? No.
No way.
No, they were an adventure race boat to say, I don't want to run. I don't want to walk. I think I can go down this river and cut my time and win the race.
Oh, yeah.
And so yeah,
So
I mean, all
impressive,
these
man.
kinds
Wow.
of things come out of that, you know.
Man, I just think of the old explorers, you know, like every time I go to Tri-Cities, Washington, where a lot of my family moved to, you know, you think of all the explorers that went up all those channels and cruised around and that water and the power back in the day, and they're in like that ribbed boat with like nothing.
Oh yeah, and no, like on the Lewis and Clark, like no one died.
Yeah, and that's
It's
what I'm
crazy.
thinking. It's like
It
they're
is.
going. I look at all the river tributaries and the thing, and I'm going. They just went up that thing in like a skin canoe. I'm like,
Yeah,
you-
it's insane.
That's
insane.
crazy.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
we brag about now is just like
Nothing.
Yeah.
He took a burl out of a tree, carved it, and you know, discovered part of Utah.
Yeah.
You know, it's like what
Yeah.
the, you know, it's
Shaped
just
the wood, just sitting in-
unbelievable. How'd you patch it? A dowel.
Yeah.
You know?
The first thing he made was
awesome.
a wood fire hot tub, and then he shaped all the wood in that, you know, by curving it.
It's incredible what our forefathers have done to get what we have now.
Man,
It's so impressive.
adventures.
And there's still people out there that are doing really cool stuff. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but it's like there was some guy that used to go. He was trying to teach people about climate change, and he was going in a sailboat that someone had given him. He had solar panels. He's raising like 3 kids on this thing, and they would go to all the tallest peaks where they'd stop, kind of like you do in Prince William Sound in your boat. And they're doing this like up in the Arctic. They're doing the Arctic Passage. They're going to little villages and teaching people, and they're with their kids. And it's like, this guy's doing this on like no heat diesel drip stove,
Yeah.
like in the middle of nowhere with his wife and kids. And he's like, yeah, you got to be nice to your wife. He goes, because she's the only one that's like of age to save you. When you're up in a crevasse.
Brian, thanks for coming in and thanks for chatting with us.
this was
and
great.
All the knowledge you have. And, man, I learned a lot. And anyone that wants to check it out, Alaska Raft Connection on Facebook, and also the website, alaskaraftconnection.com.
Yep.
Check out the store. I'll be there this week to chat up some more
Anytime.
with some
Anytime.
repairs and
Yeah.
maybe a new bad boy on the list. Aaron, thanks for coming and joining us as well.
Anytime.
Appreciate it.
I haven't seen you in
I know, it's been a long time.
I never forget a face though.
I was
Yeah,
telling
it's
him,
okay.
I was like, oh, I remember you always go in there and you're rushed for time or whatever. And I was like, I forgot how knowledgeable Brian is, man. He knows all these cool specs. And I always learn something talking to you, so I appreciate
Oh,
that.
cool. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I do.
Appreciate it.
You're a man of your craft, and it's really
I
wonderful.
really appreciate
to
hearing
listen
that.
to.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, you're a true Alaskan, Brian. Thanks for taking care of us for all these years and being a good friend. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
I'm
Awesome.
not sure
My
we could have
pleasure.
patched anything, on those trips. The early trips.
Thank you, Alaska, for listening. We appreciate you. Check out the website, alaskawildproject.com. Check out alaskaraftconnection.com. And as always,
Stay wild, Alaska.
Awesome. Thank you.
My speaking to you of what I call your overcautiousness. Are you not overcautious when you assume that you cannot do what the enemy is constantly doing?
The Alaska Wild Project podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors.
Barney's Sports Chalet, supplying hunters with the best hand-selected gear since 1963. The exclusive home of Frontier Gear, built for the rugged Alaskan terrain. Your one-stop shop for all your outdoor needs. Visit Barney's today at 906 West Northern Lights.
Big Rays, the Alaskan outfitter, committed to outfitting Alaskans across the state since 1947. Whether you're a recreator, parent, guide, or corporate buyer, Big Rays has the gear you need, tailored for Alaska's harsh conditions. Check out their new exclusive line of aerolic waders. Big Rays for all your outdoor gear and rugged work attire. BigRays.com.
Tailored Restoration 24-hour emergency home services, helping Alaskans restore their dreams since 1972. Services include fire, water, mold, post-emergency cleaning, repair, and remodeling. Give them a call in Anchorage, Eagle River, Matsu, or Fairbanks. Hit them up at tailoredrestorationalaska.com.
Total Truck and Alaska Overlander, Alaska's premier supplier for custom automotive accessories and overlanding products, providing all-inclusive rental vehicles and trailers custom outfitted to explore the Alaskan backcountry with a unique and convenient traveling experience.
TheTreehouseAK.com, located at 341 Boniface Parkway, Alaska's own and grown cannabis and CBD store. Ask the bud tender what the strain of the day is to get your 10% off. The Treehouse, where the culture lives. AKO Farms, located in Sitka, Alaska, built from the ground up with concentrates as their single motivation, with exclusive products such as their sugar wax, full spectrum diamond sauce cards, and more. Ask your local bud tender about AKO.
Marijuana has intoxicating effects and may be habit-forming and addictive. Marijuana impairs concentration, coordination, and judgment. Do not operate a vehicle or machinery under the influence. There are health risks associated with consumption of marijuana. For the use of only by adults 21 and older. Keep out of the reach of children, and marijuana should not be used by women who are pregnant or breastfeeding.
The Bait Shack, located on Ship Creek upstream of the bridge. Can't miss the bright red shack. They're the go-to fishing gear rental and guide service on Ship Creek. Tight lines and fish on. Come hook into the action with them. Hit them up at thebaitshackak.com.
Lawn Pro AK, Alaska's year-round professional property maintenance team. Services include weekly lawn care, custom landscaping, fertilizing, weed control, turf repair, and more. Schedule your free estimate at lawnproak.com.
Alaska's OG cider company, Double Shovel, crafting gluten-free colonial-style ciders, founded as a healthier, non-inflammatory brew option. Drop by their Pop and Tap room in Anchorage off of 58th and Arctic, or visit the second location in Kodiak. Double Shovel, award-winning ciders.
The Alaska chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, BHA, is the voice of our Alaskan public lands, waters, and wildlife. Their goal is to uphold our hunting and fishing legacy while keeping our public lands wild. Stand up today and join BHA at backcountryhunters.org.
Should you not claim to be at least his equal in prowess and act upon the claim? I say try. If we never try, we shall never succeed. This proposition is a simple truth, and it's too important to be lost sight of for a moment. If we cannot beat the enemy where he now is, we never can. It is all easy if our troops march as well as the enemy, and it is unmanly to say they cannot do it.